And shall we go ahead and get started? We've got, so welcome everyone to our work session. I'm glad we're calling it a work session. It really never was a retreat. So it's good to call it a work session for October 19th, 2020. And we've got a list of agenda items. And if it's okay with the board, we'll just go down these in order that it's listed on the agenda, unless anyone has any preferences for changing up the order. I'll entertain any suggestions for that.
There's a outside chance that members of ACES may call in to provide input on the waste contract. I don't see any of them on right now, so no need to bring that up to the top of the agenda, but I'll just keep an eye out, and if one of them does pop in, I'll make a motion that we try to prioritize that when we finish whatever item we're on.
Sure, that'll be fine. And just for the benefit of the public watching, we typically do not do public comment during work sessions, and but certainly welcome public comment at our next scheduled board meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the work session items. We've got 2021 priorities as item number 1. Matt, you want to lead that off?
Yeah, so we listed some staff priorities for 2021, and I also listed last year's priorities that the board had come up with for this year. Scroll to that, which included economic development 1500 Colton and the improvements to that, 88th Street, its completion, requiring open space, some sustainability, renewable energy goals, establishing a finance committee and other committee improvements. And then others were discussion of home rule, KPIs, affordable housing project, and community satisfaction survey. Some of the staff priorities for upcoming year: getting the 1500 Colton building open, completed and open, trying to get construction on Main Street and that development going, completion of parts 1 and 2 in Marshall Bridge in downtown Superior. Some kind of progress on an affordable housing project is what we'd like to see. Progress towards redevelopment of the marketplace in some fashion. Continue with our economic development services. Trying to fill any vacancies and keep businesses going, especially during this pandemic. Establishing sustainability goals. Completion of our Headworks project in the wastewater treatment plant. We got the McCaslin Mill and Overlay project, which is south of Colton. Completion of Promenade Drive in the downtown Superior project, and flood mitigation and US 36 bikeway extension.
I'll go first. Just a question. I mean, with the 2 downtown Superior ones, you know what? Let me step back. I mean, what I like about the goals we have for 2020, those were ones that we controlled, implicitly, like
Sure.
either through the appropriation of money or ordinances that we passed. With downtown Superior, I mean, how much degree of freedom does staff or the board really have?
Well, I mean, we have inspections and that kind of stuff. So we need to keep the developer on track. They have the agreement that they have to meet. If they don't meet that, we need to monitor that and keep you guys updated and let you know that they're not going to get the bridge done on time if that's the case, and what we need to do about that. So there's some things that we need to do to make sure that those projects get completed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I personally,
these are just staff's priorities. We're looking to hear what the board has as far as priorities go. So.
Yeah, no, I like the 1500 Colton. I like progress on an affordable housing project, redevelopment of Superior Marketplace. Again, that might not be one that we can directly develop on our own, but it's one that we can partner to. I think just downtown Superior, it's a question mark in my head in terms of if we threw all our resources at it, what does that actually even do? Like, does it move the needle?
I like having it as a listed priority just for the simple reason that it's top of mind. I do think that regular engagement with the developer to let them know that it's on our mind. We've got a approved plan sitting on the shelf that we want to see executed, and what can we do, if anything? Maybe there's not much we can do, but what can we do to help move that along? And so I'm looking at my list, that's the top one on my list is.
I tend to agree. I mean, I view this list, two quick comments. Number one, I view the list as like, it's the sanity check-in, right? If we find ourselves in a board meeting, the future board finds themselves in a board meeting where we're spending a tremendous amount of time on, I'm going to make it up, a Sister Cities project that is, tactically something that can be done and turned over, and maybe it should be done. But then if it's going over a lot of meetings and it's taking a lot of time, then it's sort of the head scratcher. Hey, wait a minute, why? So that's why I like this prioritization list, because it anchors our time and the staff time to just that, the priorities. And so I think we should run the list. I do just want to throw out the comment, I don't know if anybody else has, there's unambiguously 2 new members of the board in a month. And so it's a little unfair to go too far ahead for priorities in 2021, knowing that there's going to be 2 new members of the board, at least in a month or so. And I say a month or so only because for those that are watching at home, election may take a little bit to certify.
I completely agree with that. I would really prefer that we don't set our 2021 priorities until we have a new board.
I'm fine with having the discussion, but obviously I want the input from the new board members as well. So, I'm fine with us talking directionally, and just with the caveat that all of this is subject to being modified to, take into account the suggestions from the new board members. I like this list. The 2 that I would add to it personally, we're going to have this discussion later in the retreat as a separate topic, but I want the board to actually set a goal for adopting, renewable energy goals in terms of powering town facilities by a date. So I want us to actually, we've talked about it a couple times, but I want us to actually adopt it and kind of commit to executing upon it. And then the other thing that I thought would be appropriate for us to put on the list is additional focus on the airport and airplane noise, and continuing to work on the airport roundtable. And then obviously that's another agenda item for tonight, but I think it's a big priority in terms of what we're hearing from our residents. And I think that that's something that we should continue to focus on. The other thing that I think it's been talked about at a number of different board meetings, and if we're going to be serious about it, we should probably put it in some sort of document in terms of a strategic plan, is what Ken has raised at multiple meetings. If we're going to be looking at capital improvement projects and considering the possibility to change our mill levies to allow some of those projects to get done sooner rather than later, we need to have that conversation at a minimum, and probably set some sort of directional guidance in the form of a goal. So adopting some sort of position of the board with respect to what our current mill levies are, and what capital improvement projects are currently unfunded that we want to deal with.
Mark, I completely agree on the airport one. It was one that I'd like to have seen here last year. It's progress on the IGA, or sorry, on the roundtable through the IGA, and then everything and anything we can do. No question there. And then as far as the mill levy, I agree as well. I mean, maybe it's as simple as establish a long-term, long-range capital plan, and the financing required to achieve it.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say, I think that's a good way to frame it. Even though I've come forward and said that I think it makes sense to assess this from a mill levy perspective, that's just because that's the conclusion that I've seen probably makes the most sense. But I want it to be a broader discussion. Let's evaluate all the possibilities. Let's look at the entire revenue side, and frankly, we're going to have to look at the expenditure side at some point too to decide what our priorities are. So I think that makes sense. And frankly, I think there would be good direction to town staff if we say, let's have this conversation first quarter of next year. That way there's plenty of time, because some of this might require a ballot measure. That way there's plenty of time to plan for that. And we can actually get the wheels in motion when it makes sense. So I'm full in agreement there. I have no objection to adding work towards the roundtable. I think that's a critical piece that we should be working towards with the airport. On my list, I had a lot of the same things that Matt already put out there. Economic development. Mark, for yours related to a actual date certain, I kind of couched that more, I think, the way Matt has his, where I was more just looking for I want to come to those sustainability and renewable energy goals, but I want to rely on both ACES and a sustainability person to guide us into what those goals should be. I don't want us to presuppose anything, so I'd rather keep it broader for now. But yes, absolutely, I want to see us actually make a movement in that direction this year. Downtown Superior, obviously, commercial core, Parks 1 and 2, Marshall Bridge, and for me personally, I'm going to keep bugging Bill and staff about getting tract age moved up, the park and tract age moved up. That way we can actually deliver on some benefit to our residents in that part of town. And then one thing that's not on this list that I had is actually coming to an agreement and creating a plan that's accepted by the board for long-term staffing locations. So whether that means a town hall expansion, or whether, I know I heard both Kevin and I think Laura, we talked about this during the budget meetings, talk about maybe we should be looking at other topics also, or other areas from a rental perspective, whatever. I don't want us to keep kicking the can down the road and having all these temporary fixes. I'd like us to actually address this issue and have a plan going forward. So whatever that conversation needs to be, I want to have that this year, and let's actually put a plan in place.
Okay, good items. Any?
The only thing I'm going to add is, and I think I made this pitch a year ago and it didn't make it to the top, or just KPIs. And the reason here, as you look across municipalities, others have, they just have the KPIs in one place. We have them, we just don't collect them. I think, ask yourselves, how many TSC projects are underway? How many traffic accidents occurred last year? How many people visited the pools this year versus last year? Is the increase going up? We keep hearing that people think the pools are being renovated, but what are the numbers showing us? And there's no shortage of what can be measured. And I'm struggling what it is that we do measure and how we make decisions absent that data. I think Kevin, you brought up something, we were talking about town hall expansion. How many residents actually visit town hall? Where is that data captured? And if it isn't captured, how are we using, how are we making a decision on capital expenditures? So anyways, I still think we should be collecting and then broadcasting the KPIs that we already collect. I think I was probably the only one that voted for it last year to get it on the list, but I think it is valuable as we think about what we should spend cash on. Because if we're not measuring it, how do we even know it's the right place to go?
I don't have anything additional to add. I just want to distinguish between, the airport's a big topic, and the roundtable is one strategy or one thing that needs to be done related to the airport, but it's not the only thing. So I just don't want to say, airport dash roundtable. To me, there's a separate topic related to the airport. And that's the question, I think Laura and I have been asking for over a year, what are the actual strategies that we can execute on to help reduce the noise? And what we've heard is, well, you should set up a roundtable, which is cool. And I agree, the FAA wants a roundtable, but I'm a little bit, I'd like to hear something we could execute on. So that's the only other thing. I just want to reinforce sort of what, if our objective here is to, let's run a list, I think that's a great idea. If we're going to do what we often do, which is, okay, now that we have the list, let's regurgitate that back and get the 3 and rank. I want to reinforce what I said, I think Laura supported, which is, let's just maybe today run the list and then revisit this in November as the 2021 priority. Because in the spirit of, we all want shorter meetings. why would we run the list if we need to run it again in 6 weeks?
Yes, exactly. I think the priorities just may change. And I also think it potentially puts a new board member at a disadvantage if we already have this pre-baked list of priorities that frankly,
Right.
if I were new to the board, I wouldn't feel comfortable coming in and saying, great work, guys, let me upend all of that. So
Right.
we should just hold off.
Okay, would it be a good idea for, maybe just for the sake of providing clarity to Matt, for each individual perhaps to just email your priorities to Matt? He can have those compiled and kind of ready to go for the next time we revisit this with a new board. Yes, no?
I think that's fine. I'm also fine just based on what we just talked about right now to just revisit it then once we've got a new board.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to build on it with additional emails to Matt.
Okay.
Yeah,
if-
I kind of I like, well, as much as I like emails, Clint, I mean, I kind of value hearing from people. You know, it's easy to just say KPIs, right? But that's, you know, Neil has such a passion, and it's, you know, you can't improve what you don't measure. And he was making that point to us last year. And, you know, for me, that's kind of top of the list. I don't think it would have been, if I was just emailing Matt, that would not have been top of the list for me. But based on what we just talked about, it's an example. So I think the narrative is important.
Okay. All right, very good. We'll move on to anything else before we move on.
I was just going to say, Mike Foster has joined us from ACES. So if we could move up the waste contract to now, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. All right, let's talk about item F, which is trash recycling bid review.
I didn't get a chance to read that email that just came in. So if there's a share screen, that might be helpful. Or if somebody could walk me through, I'm sorry, I know there's an email within the last couple of hours. I'm not current with the last couple of hours.
I don't see an email from the last couple of hours. Did I miss one?
I think you're talking about the message from Martin that was addressing some of the questions that ACES had. Is that right?
At
Yeah.
4 o'clock.
I've got,
So
go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, Martin provided some information to the board as well as to, I think, ACES as well, with regard to the waste connections. There was a question or some clarification that was needed in there about the fleet for waste connections. They had indicated that their fleet is partially fueled with natural gas. Some of the vehicles are natural gas and biogas from water resource recovery facility. And then in Western Disposal's rate term proposal, there's an annual increase based on CPI. So those were the two clarifications.
Can I ask a quick question before we jump into it? You know, because I think right now the town does a billing for trash and then sort of just pays Western Disposal directly, and it's really just one size fits all. This is more like my Comcast bill, where there's 19 different things that I could have that, you know, my neighbor may not have any of them, which is fine because I'm direct billing through Comcast. Is the concept here that the town is still going to handle all the billing and invoicing, or is that going to get handed off to the trash hauler?
We'll handle it for the basic services. So for your weekly trash and recycling, or if it's bi-weekly recycling, whatever's decided tonight, we handle that. Any additional items that the residents want to add, they'll handle that directly through the provider.
Okay. All right.
That's how it's
That's a
handled.
dumb question, Matt. Why?
Just basically, it's easier from a staff perspective, from a workload perspective, for us to handle the base and for the trash provider to handle the additional services.
No. But I mean, why? I mean, I get base plus additional. Let's just break it down even simpler than that.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it? What do other communities do? I mean, I never thought about this. What do other communities do? Is there a direct bill component? I mean, I know we're fortunate, we have some utility billing expertise.
Right.
And if that's our expertise and we're getting and it's okay because, okay, that's what staff do, or we get a 10% discount if we front load the cash and they don't have to do the billing. I don't know. I'm just asking why.
Yeah, we're able to do it through our utility billing. So it's just a service. If it's easier for the resident, they get one bill from the town through your utility billing. It includes water, sewer, storm, and this landscape fee, rather than having multiple bills, with the trash provider. And so we take that on for the resident.
I
So
think that's
th-
normal in industry, Matt, if I can just interrupt real quick. For the jurisdictions that have taken over the utility service of providing solid waste collection, it's included as a utility bill item. For the folks that don't do that as a jurisdiction, and they individually bill, like in Westminster or in some other jurisdictions around here, they would get an individual bill to the residents for that service.
So Martin, the attachment that was here, like Lafayette, Louisville, Longmont, North Glen, the town is doing the billing and invoicing, but then Erie, Broomfield, Boulder, it's sort of everyone's doing that on their own.
Yes.
Okay. I think Arvada just transitioned, or they're in the midst of transitioning to city billing away from individuals. Part of it is to help reduce the number of trucks driving through towns because it's one hauler as opposed to 5 for a neighborhood.
So we included, for comparison to other communities, in the packet for you, also the final bid tab. So we received 2 bids, one from Western Disposal, one from Waste Connections. So the current services that we provide to our customers or our residents through this contract, which is weekly trash and bi-weekly recycling, Waste Connections came in with a cost of $9.95, which is basically almost no increase. There's a slight increase, but it's basically no increase. Western Disposal came in at $20.76 for the same service. And then the bids also included for weekly trash, weekly recycling, and then weekly trash, recycling, and composting. And those are in the bid tab for you as well. So we're looking for just direction from the board. We'd like to put this agreement together this week. It'll probably be later this week. You'll see it in your packet for Monday for consideration so that this board can approve a contract with whichever company you decide to move forward with. Get that in place on Monday. And then if it's Waste Connection, there wouldn't be any really transition, of course. If it's Western Disposal, we'll have to start that transition process for the first of the year.
Matt, I had a question about the weekly recyclables versus biweekly for the Waste Connections option.
Yeah.
I think just looking at the email that we had gotten from Mike Foster, he was kind of recommending that weekly recyclables option. Saw neighboring communities are typically biweekly for recyclables, and I know personally I do my best to recycle, but being a one-person household, I do not fill either my trash or my recycling very often, that is. So what I was wondering is there some option for residents to opt in for weekly recyclables and pay that on their own? Or is this an all or nothing where kind of the whole town has to be weekly or biweekly?
Yeah, it's for, it would be either or. The customers don't have an option to pay an additional cost for a weekly recycle.
Okay.
And I, just speaking from my own experience, I've lived in both Sagamore, where we worked on the town's waste contract, as well as now Rock Creek, where we're on the HOA's contract. And I will say that there were times where the bi-weekly on recycling was just not enough, and we were diverting recyclables into our waste just because we had to put it somewhere and my recycling was already full. So I actually do agree with the recommendation that we got from Mike. I think it does make sense to do Waste Connections weekly trash and recyclable option. It's just a pittance more than the biweekly recycling. It's going to help with our diversion rates. It provides better service to the town for hardly any additional money. It seems like the right way to go, in my opinion.
Just a quick question to staff again. So Republic's covering Lafayette and Louisville. They didn't bid at all?
Yes, that's correct. They did not.
And, you know, another factor that comes into play here, I think, for us is Waste Connection currently provides for Rock Creek HOA and all the households within that HOA. So some, you know, some companies may take that into consideration when they're thinking about bidding.
Thanks.
I'll second Ken's statement that Waste Connections weekly recycle service seems to be the best option to me to continue with. It seems like Waste Connections got a very good handle on the business here, and it's good having one hauler do the whole town. And I think it's they've provided a very good price to us, and the small increase for weekly recycling, I think will be appreciated by those who need it. And so that's the direction I would suggest going.
So yet another question for me. So, you know, so there, in terms of trying to slice this, everything in gray, the town is going to pick one of those, and then everybody that's in the coverage area will get that. So if I were to compare weekly trash with recyclables for 13 to weekly trash, recyclables, and compost, it's 25.70. So it's a difference of $12. But then over to the right, you can opt in to bi-weekly yard waste or compostables for $9.50, which is actually less. So this whole thing just totally has confused the heck out of me, because I'm not quite sure what, you know, a resident is going to get signed up for. So they would, you know, we would make the decision, you know, on something in the gray, and then they could presumably opt into the composting, which by rights comes out cheaper for them anyways.
Well, the difference there, Neil, is it looks like that option 3 for additional services is for biweekly composting, not whereas the option in gray is weekly.
Well, thank you. That makes it clear, which is consistent with what we have here in Rock Creek, is Waste Connections comes out twice a month between April and October. And I'm paying the $9.50 a month. Actually, I'm paying, I think, less. So either way, or more, I'm not sure. Okay.
I'm really torn between the weekly versus biweekly recyclables. I just, $3 a month, like, yes, it's a cup of coffee, but that's also like half the price of a Spotify subscription. And I'll say I, for one, didn't get Spotify for a long time because I didn't think it was worth it. So I don't know. I don't necessarily want to force everyone to pay $3 a month when that may mean something different to different families, particularly if right now, you know, kind of continuing the current level of service. I don't know that we heard such an outcry to step it up to weekly recyclables that I want to go that route. That said, I think the argument could be made, and I will make it right here, that, you know, if we're a town who wants to focus on recycling, we can make that decision, and the $13 a month is still cheaper than Western Disposal's biweekly recyclables option.
Okay, others?
I tend to agree with Laura. I mean, I think the 13 a month is what we kind of heard. A lot of people wanted weekly recycling as an option. I think where I'm struggling is not every home is the same size, but we're trying to force fit something that will fit for everybody, and it may not work. I mean, the option for a smaller trash container seems available, but it doesn't come with a decrease in your monthly cost, even though you're effectively putting less into the landfill. And that to me is bizarro. I mean, if I had a trash container that was literally half the size of Ken's, I would want to be paying less. Because the goal here should be giving everybody a tiny little trash can and a giant recycle bin and a compost bin, because that's the behavior we want to try to get. But there's no economic incentive for that to happen here whatsoever.
No, and I think what we saw, I mean, just looking at the asterisk at the bottom of the bid sheet, I mean, what Western Disposal put out there for what you just said, that's $27.68. And that's more than twice what we're seeing for the Waste Connections weekly recyclables. And yeah, that doesn't come with the organics, but the organics can be added bi-weekly. I mean, it's just, as much as I would love to, I'll state, Neil, that's what I was going for. That's what I would have loved to see out of our contract. That was my goal. I just don't know if we can economically push that onto our residents. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And I think this Waste Connections weekly is our next best alternative while still keeping it economical for the residents.
Looks like Mike from ACES would like to speak. Were you okay going to Mike now for comments? Okay, Mike, go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the discussion. One point that I wanted to go back to about the townwide collection and Rock Creek, and I think this is something we should look forward to during the next contract cycle, is to collaborate with Rock Creek to see if we can get one townwide contract, because I do believe that there will be some additional economies of scale to be had. And some of the conversations that we've been having, or you all have been having around weekly collection versus biweekly collection and compost service and things like that, I think some of those issues could probably get worked out if there was a larger economy of scale, and a townwide contract might be the way to do that. So something to be thinking about when this is up in the next 5 years. Pivoting, I appreciate Ken's comment about probably our next best option is to move forward with a weekly garbage and weekly recycling collection. While it hasn't come to the board yet, ACES has embraced some sustainability goals, and one of those goals is around reducing waste to landfill by 30% by 2030. Our goal is to take this out to the community, get some feedback, and then bring this back to the Board of Trustees for discussion and approval. So having a weekly collection of recyclables will better enable the town to achieve that lofty sustainability goal of reducing waste to landfill by 30% in the next 10 years, or almost 9 years at this point. So that was part of the thinking behind the recommendation that I provided.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the comments and all the work that ACES did on reviewing this and options. Appreciate all of your work.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments, other board member comments?
I do actually, Mike brings up a really good point and question. So I did have lots of conversations with certain members of the HOA over the past year, trying to do exactly what Mike just suggested. And the timing of our contracts just doesn't work out. Matt, I don't know. I mean, clearly we haven't seen the agreement yet, so I don't know what the terms are going to be. But if there was a way that I believe the HOA's contract will end before ours, if there is a way to write our agreement so that the HOA can be absorbed into this, that way if the HOA chooses to do that, I want the option to be able to do so if all parties agree and align. We never seem to be able to do this because we're all on different contracting cycles, and that seems to have been the issue to date. So if we can somehow remove that as a barrier, maybe we can actually have that conversation and possibly merge those contracts in the future.
Yeah, I'll talk to Kendra tomorrow about that.
I would also say, I mean, one other way that I might like to see it is just have our contract have some sort of reevaluation whenever the HOAs is up, so that we're not necessarily absorbing them into ours, but on June 2021 or whenever it is, like, we can both renegotiate at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, Kevin, comments?
I'm good with Waste Connections and the recommendation from ACES.
Same. I mean, I'm also disappointed that they didn't quite figure out what we were trying to do, but it's okay. It's a great value.
Sorry, you're disappointed in what, Kevin?
I would have, I mean, I think the value that Waste Connections is going to bring is fantastic. I just, you know, if ACES is setting this goal, I just felt like a partnership with Waste Connections saying, okay, we can keep the price the same, help you meet this goal. That's felt like what we were trying to do with the RFP. And I don't think they quite got it, but that's okay. It's great service, great value. I'm fine with it.
Matt, do you know if it'd be possible, assuming we do go forward with Waste Connections, to have somebody at our next meeting just ask some questions? Because I in the email that we received, I think there is some good information in there. I'd love to hear what type of outreach they can do to help us achieve our diversion rate goals and whatnot. So I'd love to be able to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody from the company.
Definitely we'll have somebody on the meeting on Monday with us.
Yeah, they're supposed to be the experts, right? So we're asking them, you know, here's our diversion rate goal. What do you recommend? Mm-hmm. And to me, the economics seem to should have made it, but that's not where they went.
Okay, anything further on this? All right, good discussion. Do you want to circle back now to item B, which is streetlights? All right, Matt.
Yeah, I'll have Alex introduce this item for us.
Sure, and Mark, if you can bring up the first attachment there with the town-owned streetlights. I wanted to give you a little history and inventory of streetlights in town, look at the various colors, we have pictures and so forth. So we have about 1,282 streetlights in town that are either owned by the town or owned by Excel, and I'll explain the difference in a few minutes. But Original Superior developed with steel Cobra head streetlights on wooden poles. And then when Rock Creek Ranch came in, the decision was made to go with decorative streetlights. And these included black fiberglass poles on residential streets and teal poles with bell-shaped fixtures on arterial streets, such as Rock Creek Parkway. You having trouble there, Martin, getting that up? I'll keep going though. The streetlights are owned by Excel, but the town pays for the electricity and bulb replacement according to rates approved by the Public Utilities Commission. So everything you see up there, the town ultimately pays for. Whenever a light gets knocked down and needs to be replaced, that's billed as a separate charge to the town. So we pay for that as well. Okay, go up one page there, Martin. There you go. So these are the black fiberglass poles that you see in many of the residential areas in town. There are 596 of those poles on pretty much every street in Rock Creek Ranch. Go down one, Martin. The next type are these bell-shaped teal poles, or green, whatever you want to call that color. And they're along Rock Creek Parkway. And there's 117 of those poles. So quite a bit in terms of those. And those are pretty expensive when they get knocked down, a long wait, because it's hard to get those fixtures. Okay, keep going there, Martin. Here's another type of fixture that was on the McCaslin Bridge, just 4 of those poles. There are also a couple, I think, behind Town Hall of that style. Okay. So when Coal Creek Drive was designed and built, there was a discussion about streetlight poles, and the town board wanted to do something a little different. And these are the poles that were approved along Cold Creek Drive. They're black curved, the kind of the bell shaped as the ones on Rock Creek Parkway, but they're black. There's 36 of those poles, and there's some that are ped heights about 15 feet, and then at intersections they're the 23-foot height. You can see where those locations are along Cold Creek Drive. Okay, next. So these are the wooden poles, and it's about a dozen in Original Superior with the Cobra head fixtures on the wooden poles. And this is something that the board, I want to just plant a seed that, if we proceed with undergrounding and we replace those wooden poles, what happens to the lights and what types of poles and fixtures do we want there? Do we want to go with decorative lights? Do we want improved lighting? Although the original Superior doesn't want sidewalks, so the need for street sidewalk lighting is not as great as in other parts of town. But there's I think a policy that the board needs to look at down the road of what types of replacement lights we want on those poles, and do we want to do something different in Original Superior or something up to a standard as the rest of the town. Okay, next. So then we have these Cobra head. Some of these are galvanized poles. And what happened was most of these were green, and because they were painted, and we were getting a lot of the mag chloride eating away at the bottoms, Excel decided to come through, and they did a structural evaluation of those, and they decided to replace a number of those, and the town decided at that point, let's replace these with galvanized poles. So all the ones on McCaslin have been replaced with galvanized steel poles, and some along Marshall. There are a bunch of these along Colton that are still the teal green. So we have 268 poles like these. I would note that Excel did have an LED program to replace. We pay a little bit higher rate than we used to, and Excel agreed to replace all of the Cobra head fixtures with LED lights. Is that next one on this one?
Alex, real quick question. You mentioned that the mag chloride was impacting the structural integrity of the poles before. Is that not a problem with the poles that are on Rock Creek Parkway?
It hasn't been so far. They do an evaluation periodically. We haven't seen one probably in about 5 years. So I don't really know the condition, but I would imagine that we may have that problem, down the road. I could inquire of Excel whether they have any more recent evaluation of those poles. I think the ones on Colton may have that problem. I'm not sure about the ones on Rock Creek Parkway.
Okay, thank you.
So these are the ones in the marketplace. They have the box style fixtures, and again with the green poles. There are approximately 30 of these poles along Sycamore and Marshall. We have replaced some of these with Cobra heads and galvanized steel poles. Okay, and Martin, I think that's the last one there. And if you can bring up the other attachment. So with the advent of LED street lights and their demonstrated energy savings compared to high pressure sodium bulbs, the town adopted a policy of requiring LED lights on all new street lights. The town approached Excel to replace existing street lights with LED lights, and they had developed a tariff several years back for LED lights, and they agreed to replace all the Cobra head lights with LED lights. But all the decorative fixtures, they didn't have a tariff at that point, and there's so many different types of decorative fixtures, decorative poles, and then to replace the fixtures. They didn't have rates applying to LEDs at that point. This is several years ago. I think they now have, I think, 3 different tariffs for various decorative lights. Whether we have the poles that would be amenable to those tariffs, we haven't done that, but I think those are ongoing discussions we're having with Excel. So at that time, basically Excel said, well, if you want LED lights with decorative lights for new ones, you'll have to own and operate and maintain those LED poles and LED fixtures and lights. So that's what we started to do. And this is some of the first ones we did with Calmonte, actually did in Calmonte 1, I think, and these are Calmonte 2. We had a decorative light fixture that is LED. Okay, go down, Martin. Here's one in Coal Creek Crossing. Coal Creek Crossing, we tried to match the existing bell-shaped black pole and fixture and that was on Coal Creek Drive. So that's what they have in Coal Creek Crossing. Okay. And then on the interchange, when we did the DDI, we had to replace most of the streetlights that were up there. CDOT basically said, we don't do streetlights on our highways. If you want them, you need to install and pay for those. They said we can install them if we own them and maintain them, have a separate meter. And so that's what we did. So all the interchange lights on our side of the highway are owned by the town. When one gets knocked down, we have to get it up and replaced, and we have to replace the bulbs that are on our side of the interchange. We also have a couple of the black ones on the pedestrian island, median island on the bridge. Discovery Office Park has one similar to Calmonte. Okay, and then we have the downtown Superior Town Center. When they came in, they wanted to make a statement with their lighting and to go along with the brick pavers and all the other street furniture and so forth. So this is the light that was proposed and eventually approved by Planning Commission by the town board. A couple of different types here. We have the types with the wicks, and those are meant to be in the Main Street area. And then we have the ones without the wicks that'll be in other areas of downtown Superior. So then we use that as kind of a standard for lanterns and for Rogers Farm. To develop that standard, we started thinking pretty heavily about maintenance of these poles and the problems that we're having with Excel replacing decorative poles. So we decided, well, let's get some of these poles in stock, store them, and then if they get hit, we can have them on hand to get them repaired. And that, in fact, happened in a couple instances, and we were able to replace the street poles within a matter of days rather than the 9 months or so it usually took to replace a decorative light pole. So we have that plan in place. We have a firm that we've contracted with to be on call to replace any bulbs. Hopefully, with LEDs, you don't have to replace them very often. But if they get knocked down, we want to have someone on board ready to replace the street light poles. So that's kind of it. That's the inventory. We're all over the block in terms of different lights and different features. And I think that item tonight was on colors, but I wanted to give you a history of all the different types of lights we had and how that evolved.
Alex, I appreciate that, and I think this was me who requested this to be added. So I'll kick it off. And thanks for adding the additional pieces about our policy with replacement to LEDs. I know that's an important piece, not just for quality, but also our sustainability goals. But looking at the three styles of poles that are still that teal green color. I saw all of them are owned by Excel. Is there a standard life cycle with those where Excel would come in and replace them anyway after X number of years, even if they don't have any structural integrity issues, or is it really just based off of structural integrity, or if they get knocked down for whatever reason?
Matt, I don't know if you can help, but when they did the structural evaluation, and I think we still ended up paying for those. They basically said these poles are reached, they're unsafe because of their structural issues, so we're going to replace them. And then we started getting some big bills when they went through and did the replacements.
Yeah. They typically just replace them when there's structural integrity questions or concerns with them. Otherwise, they're not on just a scheduled, life cycle type of replacement. It's more of if as needed.
If you guys had to put a ballpark to it, or is it maybe every 10 years it'll get replaced, or these 20 years?
Well, Alex, I think the new galvanized steel ones will probably last a lot longer than the painted ones.
I think we're in the 40 to 50 year life of the galvanized. I think what we saw with the teal, the painted ones, is that we may be in the 25 to 30 year life. So I think that's why we went for the galvanized to get a longer life. And I don't think we've had any problems structurally with the galvanized.
Okay, so my initial purpose in bringing this up is I do believe that the way our community presents itself impacts both future residents who come and evaluate our community as whether they want to live here, and also future businesses as they drive around and try to evaluate our community. And I think all of our black poles, our galvanized steel poles are just fine, but I think our teal poles look a bit dated, and I think it ages our community. I think they're not the only thing that ages our community, but I think there's also our gold lettering on our various signs, our teal end caps on top of some of our signs. These are all things that I think, even though no one's going to particularly say that's why I didn't come here, it's things that age and lower the values of both property and I think desirability to be here. So my preference, where I was hoping we could go tonight, is that as our teal / green lights need replacing, we take a position that we start replacing them with either black or the galvanized steel. So it sounds like the ones that are on Rock Creek Parkway might be good candidates for the galvanized steel ones, but the other black ones might be better candidates for the other two types of poles. But I realize that we could be looking at a 20-year implementation time frame, and I don't know if that's optimal either.
So I'm a little offended because I really like the teal lamps. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So you said something, Alex, that I think I'm not quite sure I understand. So Excel will make the decision on when to replace a pole, but they're going to send us the bill anyways. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
So it's really not their decision. I mean, if we're paying for it anyways, this is a decision we should ultimately drive.
Matt, do you want to comment? I think we've been
Yeah.
driving most of those decisions with streetlight
Yeah.
poles.
I mean, it can get quite costly, so we need to
Yeah.
prioritize which poles get replaced and do the ones that look like they have some structural integrity issues.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. If we tell Excel, hey, we want these number of poles replaced, they'll replace them, but
Okay.
we need to make sure we have the budget for it.
Okay. But I just want to be clear in my own head that this is really not an Excel decision, other than, if one is down, they'll tell us and they'll bill it to us. But if we want to wholesale replace the ones on Rock Creek, that is a decision we can make, without their guidance or input whatsoever.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
one caveat, I know a lot of other communities have looked at, they wanted to convert to LEDs much faster than what Excel was ready to do. And they looked at buying out, all the Excel poles. So that's a pretty expensive proposition, but they felt they would pay for it, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. I'm not sure what the payback period would be. So a lot of other entities have gone that route. And we went with the Cobra heads, we certainly want to work with them because they had a tariff and they were able to do it, and we just paying a little more, and we got new poles and new LED lights.
Yeah, and for the decorative ones that you see on the residential streets in Rock Creek, I know some other communities have been able to just replace the top of the light with an LED. So, we'll, continue to talk and work with Excel to see if maybe that's a possibility for us as well.
And I think this folds really well into the sustainability goals. I mean, just looking at the purple lights on Rock Creek Parkway, what's the cost to replace them, and what's the timeline for cost savings on LEDs with just that bucket of lights?
Yeah, that's one thing that would be good. I think we have a track record now of what these new LED lights are costing us, and we can now use this new position to help us make those calculations. What's the real payback for replacing these poles?
All right, thanks.
Alex or Matt, is there a possibility of replacing it, talking about those 596 poles that are in Rock Creek and Sagamore, the black ones with the single light on top? Is there a possibility of replacing the fixture on top and keeping the same pole versus?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about in my comment. Yeah.
All right, good. I think there's a lot of those, and we could hopefully see a big savings from doing that, and probably get better light out of them too. Some of those just don't produce great light.
Just a caution on those. They are much brighter, and they sometimes penetrate in windows of houses that are really close to them. So it's just something that, they are definitely more efficient, and the efficiency comes with the consequence of, a lot of people have had them replaced next to their homes, and it's just been shining in their living rooms. So it's something we just got to be careful of.
Any feedback on original Superior?
My feedback would be I'd like the fixtures that are along Coal Creek Drive, and I think to the extent that lights are removed and could be replaced with something comparable to what is installed along Coal Creek Drive, I think those look very nice and seem to perform well. I like the variation of the intersections have the higher ones, and the mid blocks have the lower ones, and it seems to work really nice.
Well, staff's kind of feeling was north of the creek would make sense to do everything with the Coal Creek bell-shaped ones, and then south to the Asbury, since that's already done on 2nd Avenue. So that kind of a dividing point of Coal Creek to have the two types.
Sure, that'd be fine too. Okay, was there other directions that you kind of needed from us, or others want to make comments on these?
I just have a question, kind of big picture. If we're talking about replacing, a significant number of lights, perhaps we could bake this into the capital improvement projects that, we've been talking about, and, as just one of the unfunded capital improvement projects. Because I imagine if there are some economies of scale, if we were to do it in a single project or a couple projects. So, if there are things in need, things that are failing and need to be replaced, rather than doing them kind of piecemeal, if we can kind of plan strategically and, budget for them and see exactly how much this is all going to cost, because, they're all expensive in and of themselves. But once we add it all together, it might be an eye-opening dollar amount.
Yeah.
And if it's, Alex, I think you said that we haven't had any type of study from Excel for about 5 years or so on the integrity of the poles on Rock Creek. If we could get that done, that's just from a safety perspective. I know we have mag chloride that goes up and down that road, just talking to Patrick, and how it's decimated our trees over there. So I'll make sure those are in good state too. And if we have a significant amount of those that aren't, this is a real conversation I like to have about changing from those green poles to maybe the galvanized poles, just for longevity and safety sakes going forward.
Okay, that's great direction. And staff will follow up on those items.
I'll also just state for the record that I hate the teal as well. So I'm
Well, Matt's been here the
directionally
longest.
supportive of doing away with teal in
I
general.
wasn't involved in that yet.
I will say I'm fine with eliminating the teal, but I also really don't think it's that big of a problem.
And that was decided, that those light fixtures and color was decided by the Metro Districts 2 and 3 boards while they were still in place. So, and I was in those meetings and they were long meetings, but that was the decision they decided.
Although if we wait long enough, teal will be cool again at some point in the near future. Just wait.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks. All right. Anything further on that? Or otherwise we'll go on to item C, which is discussion of Louisville Library and what potential changes we could make there.
So in late 2000s, the town entered into an IGA with the city of Louisville to partner on library services. And then in April of 2010, the residents approved a 1.5 million property tax increase to help fund library services and facility expenses. And though that's been in place since 2010, and our partnership with the city of Louisville has been in place since then as well. We are looking, and we will have library facilities and some services in the new 1500 Colton building that's under construction right now. Sometime after the first of the year. Currently, the city of Louisville is planning on doing limited services over there, some children's reading programs, some other maybe reading programs, library book drop-off, pickup, reservations, those type of things in the space over at 1500 Colton. Those are all need to be finalized of what those services look like and could be included in any changes to the IGA that we decide that we want to start having discussions with them about. We included in the packet the IGA, the first amendment to the IGA, which was for the book drop off at Town Hall. And then some analysis that my staff did with regard to what it would cost to open up a 6,000 and 12,000 square foot library in the town.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Neil, looks like you're ready to go.
Well, shoot. I just unclicked the mute button, but no, so obviously, Kevin and I attended the joint issues meeting with Louisville a couple of weeks ago. And I think 3 or 4 months before that, I'd attended the library board of trustees meeting where we learned about the budget reduction. And, I think it goes without saying, I actually really like the library in Louisville. It's a fantastic library. It is well run. I think my concern is, our collaboration or the level of coordination that we actually are afforded with by Louisville when it comes to operating a library. I think realistically, we provide them funding, they take it and they run with it, and we get little feedback at the beyond the operational level. I get a lot of feedback from Sharon in terms of what's happening within the library and stuff like that. But I think as you look at the IGA, I don't think it could have really expected much more. I don't think anybody on this board, with the benefit of 10 years of hindsight, would have structured the IGA the way that we did. But I'll be brutally honest, I think we're getting a great deal. For what we're paying relative to the services of running our own library, it's good. The real question ultimately comes down to, in my head, as you look across the country, look across the state, towns our size, most of them all have their own libraries. We're lucky in that the Louisville library is not very far. If you take anybody in Broomfield or in Boulder, library or library annex is actually quite a bit further in some cases than where we are from Louisville. So we're afforded a good, well-run library relatively closely. But I think fundamentally for a town that's growing to almost the size of Louisville, we've got to really start considering a library of our own. I think the space in 1500 Colton is going to be fantastic. And I double checked, it's about 1,200 square feet. It's going to be adequate, but right now the IGA with Louisville does not provide for any content. It's just going to be bare walls unless we as a town provide it, or amend the IGA for Louisville to provide some sort of content. I don't know where they sit on that at all. I don't doubt, Sharon had talked a lot about doing more programming in Superior. Prior to COVID, the thought was to do some reading at the Bell Flatirons, those kinds of areas. The issue we've always had is we just don't have a lot of convenient space for a reading group. But she was looking, COVID happened, and that kind of went out the window. So anyways, as I started saying is, towns quarter of our size, they have libraries. And I think it's about time that we start thinking seriously about it. I will also be brutally honest that I think a community our size, a library is an expensive proposition. There are no economies of scale when Louisville's got one, Lafayette's got one, Broomfield's got one, and then Superior presumably has one. Arguably, a library district makes way more sense, and that everything's an individual annex, because it struggles, my brain power to understand why all these libraries have 10 employees with their own library directors when you could just fold it under and get giant economies of scale. But I'll probably spend my lifetime trying to sort that one out. But as I was talking it over with one of the other trustees over the weekend, it dawned on me and her that realistically, we have this space coming up in downtown Superior that it does not have any programming. Why couldn't it be a library? As I think about the thousands of dollars I have spent in Louisville because of that library, whether it was going there with the kids and then walking out with a stack of books and then stopping for ice cream or pizza or something, it is I honestly feel that the library in Louisville has been an economic engine for creating downtown. If you think back to what downtown Louisville was 20 years ago, it was nothing like it is now. That library is 15 years old, and it, in my mind, has really catalyzed the growth of downtown Louisville. And I think something in our downtown community space that resembles a library may very adequately do that. And we create this fantastic connection between 1500 Colton as a community space, downtown Superior as a library, and then town hall, to the west. And you got an art mobility path that connects it all. But the realistic aspect from a math perspective is that the mill levy that we have is about 400,000 a year. Running a library is going to be about 800,000 a year. So it's another 400 that needs to come from somewhere. And I don't have an answer on how that's funded, other than, realistically, what we have with Louisville has worked great. I don't know that it's going to serve our needs longer term.
Yeah, so I mean, as Neil said, we talked this weekend. I'm really supportive of trying to figure out how can we put some sort of library services in downtown Superior. A couple of years ago, we had a resident who had a proposal for a school on the Town 15. And while I was not supportive of that full proposal, one piece of it that I thought was really interesting was the idea of creating a digital library. And part of what I'm thinking there is, we are fortunate to be a fairly affluent town where I would say the majority of our residents probably have access to iPads, Kindles, tablets, and to read books on there. So the idea of starting a digital library where people could check out digital copies of books, I think could be done with an extremely tiny footprint. It would allow us to qualify as having a library so that we can then ensure that our residents will have access to libraries throughout the state. It's also something that we could certainly build over time. And to make sure, I'm very cognizant that, as I say, most of our residents probably have access to tablets. Some do not, but I think what could work really well is maybe at 1500 Colton and potentially also at our community space downtown, offer tablets that people can check out, either while they're in the space for a couple hours to read, or even tablets that residents could check out for a week and be able to use it for whatever their needs might be. I think something like that could go a long way toward improving access for everyone in town, ensuring that we have library facilities and therefore our residents can get access to other libraries. And as Neil pointed out, it could be done at a relatively low cost.
So I'll chime in. I frankly never really thought about a library in downtown Superior, but I think there's a lot of that that makes sense. As a young family, pre-COVID, our Saturdays literally were going down to Louisville Farmers Market, buying our vegetables there, going to the vendors, getting some breakfast at one of their local eateries, and then finally, when the library opens at 10 o'clock, going in and checking stuff out. And the only reason why we were doing that was so we could actually get to the library. I think library is a draw and activates an area. So not to bring this conversation somewhere that we're not that's not agendaed or anything, but I do think it's a really good conversation to have. And I think our initial prospect for what we were going to do with the space in downtown Superior is more and more being duplicated over at 1500 Colton. And I think we need to be thinking creatively about that. Coming into the near term, I do think we need to be looking at our agreement with Louisville. Frankly, I am a little bit frustrated this year with the way the funding has gone. We provided all of our mill levy to them. They didn't consult us, and frankly, when I went back and looked at our IGA, if you look at section 2-F, which describes Louisville's duties, section F is minimum service levels, and it states that Louisville shall maintain at least the existing library hours. And then if in the event of an extraordinary loss of revenue to the city of Louisville, these service levels may be renegotiated. And I don't think we've had a renegotiation. I think what I've heard out of Neil and out of our town staff is that there were unilateral decisions made by Louisville, and those unilateral decisions meant them contributing less to the library and us being expected to contribute our same amount. And yeah, we're getting a great deal for library services, but at the end of the day, our residents still need to drive into Louisville to get those services. And if we're going to have that dependency, we need to have a strong working relationship, and that seems to have fallen apart over the past 9 months or so. So this is definitely something we need to revisit. And I don't ever really want to get lawyers involved and go over these IGA terms, but I don't think the intent of this IGA is being met right now. So I like where Laura's head is at for initially figuring out what we can do in the 1500 Colton in our small limited space. Can we set up something that's a bit digital in nature? But I don't want to invest too much there. And I want us to actually be thinking about Neil's suggestion of what can we do in downtown Superior, and maybe we take some of that space and create a more physical location that can be a driver of foot traffic and ultimately economic activity.
So good discussion. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm not sure. Well, I'll start just being a little controversial. I'm not sure I agree with the statement that we have a great deal with our neighbors in Louisville. Sorry. And I recognize that when you look at the foot traffic versus the amount of actual lending, the foot traffic is a little less proportionate than the lending. But, we are, we agreed on the ballot measure a number of years ago, over 10 years ago, to make the contribution to do what the community thought was right, because we didn't have our own library services. Forget about library, talk about library services. Library services include a digital library. Library services could include the 1,200 square feet. Now that we are creating the space for 1500 Colton, I absolutely expect Louisville to partner with us for the activation, the 1,200 square feet of library space we have at 1500 Colton. I want to know what they can do. If Louisville comes and says, I can't do anything outside of, send a reader every other Wednesday and add another Dropbox, I'm not going to be happy. And as I said in that joint committee meeting with Louisville, if I'm the board, I will seek to claw back all or some of that contribution to create our own library services within the town of Superior. So I think Louisville's been a great partner for us for 10 years. And I think we should continue that partnership to the next phase. The next phase should be Louisville activating our space. If they could do it, if they could activate our space for the $400,000 we send them, that's great. If they could activate our space and say, but wait, I need a part-time employee, or I need you to invest $100,000 in, you know, a one-time collection. Okay, we should have that conversation. But I'd like to but my first priority is having that partnership with Louisville. Again, if Louisville doesn't want to participate, I think we should look elsewhere and create our own library services in town. In terms of building, you know, the conversation about downtown Superior, I think that's interesting, but let me close out. Well, let me skip to downtown Superior and then I'll come back to 1500 Colton and close. For downtown Superior, we are years away from that space, years. It's, you know, we have 1500 Colton, it's, you know, doors are going to be open April, May, June timeframe. We got to figure this out now. And we've already decided there is library space of the 15,000 square feet. You know, somebody do the math for me. That's what percent, Neil? What would if we're 1,000, that would be, you know, 8% of our space at 1500 Colton is library services. We should figure out real quick how to program that 8% of the space. And if Louisville is going to partner, fantastic. If they need more money to activate it, we need to know how much more money they need. If they don't want to activate it and all they want to talk about is, you know, sending somebody over every other Wednesday and adding a Dropbox, and I know this is impolite in a recorded meeting, but I think we'll need to either investigate setting our own small digital library, as somebody suggested, partnering with an annex concept with other neighboring communities, or pursuing something else. But we've already decided 1,200 square feet of library services. So that's, I think, the focus. And I expect the $400,000 we've been sending. And by the way, this is not Superior's library services. I expect that residents from Louisville will also use this space, because what we heard from Louisville last year, if they had the library to design over again, they would design it a little bit differently. They would build more conference facility, which, guess what? We took that and we built. They would have more desk space, which we took and we built. They'd have more digital content, which we were going to provide. So, you know, I expect that residents from Louisville, just as I'm going to round, 20% of the activity in the Louisville library is the town of Superior. I would expect that 20% of the library services at 1500 Colton will be Louisville.
I agree with a lot of what has been said. I guess when I look at it, I'm generally happy with, you know, the fact that we have access to the Louisville Library. I think the Louisville Library is really nice. My family uses it very frequently. Both the kids are checking out books. I'm downloading, you know, ebooks and you know, Kindle books and audiobooks, and I use the New York Times subscription service, and it's great. I think it's fantastic, and I like the fact that you know, we haven't had to necessarily outlay the capital to construct our own. I think that's good. That said, I don't like that the way the IGA is currently structured, earmarking our contribution to a 1.5 mil contribution. You know, we're contributing more as our property values increase, but we're not necessarily getting a corresponding increase in services. Now, all that is subject to what are they going to do with respect to 1500 Colton. I think if Louisville, you know, steps up to the plate and says, you know, they're actually going to deliver things consistent with our existing 1.5 mil contribution, and we're able to deliver library services. We've got you know, the ability to get books delivered to 1500 Colton and have a lot of the, you know, the positive aspects of the Louisville Library at 1500 Colton, then I'm pretty happy. If they're not willing to do that and they want more money, then I think we need to start having a serious conversation about, well, maybe Broomfield, maybe Lafayette, maybe Boulder, maybe other communities would like to have the equivalent of what 1.5 mils is getting right now, for us to join. Because there's nothing, sacred about the partnership with Louisville in terms of, what we're contributing. And I think that as time goes on, this is going to get more out of whack. I mean, right now we're talking about $400,000. Just like 4 years ago, it was $250,000. So, it's not like it's been $400,000 for a while, and it's continuing to increase, and property values are continuing to increase. And so the contribution that we're going to give to Louisville is going to get more out of whack. So, I mean, and I have actually a similar concern with respect to the IGA, with respect to sales tax in downtown Superior that we're given. So I don't know if we're actually getting to the point where we want to start renegotiating agreements, we might want to think about doing a collective renegotiation of all agreements to the extent that we can. Because that's another one that, now as downtown Superior is getting built out, we're going to be subsidizing Louisville for forever. I mean, there's no sunset on those agreements. So unless we do something, I don't think we're going to get our money's worth. And I don't think that was necessarily anticipated at the time that these agreements were reached. But as time has shown, there is an imbalance and it's becoming a problem. So a lot of that can be cured depending on what they're willing to do with 1500 Colton.
Okay, I agree with most of what Mark said. I think 1500 Colton, it really is the kind of the test of what we need to see happen. I also like the comments Neil and others made around downtown Superior. I think long-term that, actually I think it was Ken, or anyhow, I like those comments around downtown Superior. I think that, those are the kind of things we need to activate that space. And I've always been a fan of let's put more in downtown Superior than less. So, but Kevin's right, it is years off, and but it's a good thing to be thinking about. Any final?
I mean, I wish Kevin would have talked before me, because I think something he said really kind of flipped a trigger with me. I mean, why did we enter this to begin with? I mean, we entered into this agreement because we didn't have library services that we were providing to our residents, and we wanted them to be able to do that. And in what is fair and equitable, we glommed onto Louisville, and we passed that ballot measure and started giving them their mills because we couldn't provide library services. Well, we're finally at that point where we as a community can provide that physical location, that library services. I mean, frankly, it almost makes more sense to not even have this IGA anymore. I mean, if I were to ask myself, why would we continue this? I don't know if I have a good answer, because we can put this $400,000 to better use building our own library services in 1500 Colton. So, I mean, I agree with Mark's ultimate suggestion. We should look at this as a package, because I too agree with renegotiating the downtown Superior agreement. So I think that's a great route to go down, but I'm finding it harder and harder to answer in any strong terms when I ask myself, why are we still in this IGA when we could actually be investing in our community with that money year after year and providing those services directly to our residents here in Superior.
So I was still listening. I just went off video for a minute so I could get some soup. My apologies. If we package this, we have space, we have doors opening some point between April and June, right? Matt, no reason to believe we don't have doors opening between April and June. Still sometime, it's a big window, but sometime in that window. So I don't want 8% of our space just locked. And as much as I'd like to bundle this, we're not going to be successful renegotiating an age-old IGA about annexed property with downtown Superior. But I think we can specifically have this conversation with Louisville and say, you're our neighbor and you've done right by us. We did right by you by passing this ballot measure. And it's hard in Colorado to get ballot measures with increased taxes passed. They're, they fail, 5 times as much as they passed. We passed one, we increased our taxes, and I made up that ratio in case the newspaper's watching. But they fail a lot. We passed one and we did right, and we've done right for 10 years. Now it's time just stage 2. So I don't necessarily, I want to renegotiate, but I worry, Ken, about bundling this. I just want to move them to stage 2. I'm confident Louisville is going to be our partner. I know they don't love what I'm saying, which is, okay, we're going to take, because they have a revenue issue. And so the $400,000 that they've become dependent on to pay the salary for the library in downtown Louisville now needs to be effectively utilized for all, or a significant portion needs to be programming 1500 Colton. That's going to be hard, but we have to get to the other side of that conversation. And I think we could do it in a couple months. If we start talking about the downtown Superior for the annex property tax, that's the reality is we're not going to solve that in a few months, in my opinion. So I like the idea of bundling, but we have an immediate need, unfortunately.
And I think framing it is, yeah, it's 2.0 of this agreement, because that is what it is. We are going to provide a service to them. As you said, this isn't going to be just Superior residents, just as Superior residents have been welcome to Louisville Library. Louisville, Boulder, Lafayette, whoever wants to come use our part of the library, I think that would be a fine expectation. And that's, and we will operate in the same way all the other libraries in our region have done. And it's just about building a brand new library amenity for both the region and the residents of Superior. I mean, yeah, I think keeping that $400,000 here in Superior makes a lot of sense. And it's about how do we make it better for everyone. And that's right. the framing of the discussion.
Right. And let me just pitch something. You guys all talked about your family experiences of being downtown Louisville, going to the farmer's market, having breakfast, doing all that. Imagine doing that under the same roof, which is what 1500 Colton is going to offer. You've got your favorite, breakfast burrito food truck right outside. You have games for the kids that are indoor, outdoor. You have, a lecture series that's being held in the back. You've got your library services. You've got your coffee. You've got your muffin. You might even be able to get your beer there. There is no other library that I'm aware of that all these amenities will be under the same roof. So Ken, I really appreciate the comment you made. This is not just going to be a destination for our community. This will be a destination for other communities, and we want to welcome those other communities.
So I completely agree that we absolutely have to start a conversation with Louisville regarding what they plan to do for 1500 Colton. I'm only, I think, probably anticipating where it's going based on the conversations that we've had to date haven't been very promising with, hey, we are so anxious about adding this, that, and the other thing. So, hopefully, Matt, I guess you've got enough to go forward, because I think, we as a group are completely on board with expecting Louisville to step up and find a way to program 1500 Colton's library space. I don't know that Louisville is there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I have a call with the manager tomorrow, actually, so it's good timing, and we'll have a conversation about the discussion tonight. And I would imagine have something in front of you sometime after the first of the year.
And I think there's an aspect of time here too, right? If we hear something not attractive to us in January, then we've got to, as a community, figure out what we're going to do.
Yep.
And not to presuppose any worst case scenario, but if we're going to make decisions that end in not being a part of this IGA anymore, the termination clause is we have to give 180 days notice before the first of any new calendar year. So you're basically talking halfway through the year, a decision has to be made.
That's a good point, Ken.
Yep. All right, anything further on this? Okay, we'll go on to item D, which is use of open space funds.
So everybody's aware that we have a 0.3% sales and use tax that was approved by the voters in November 2001 for the use of open space purchases and maintenance of open space. Happy to say we purchased the CenturyLink property this year, but consumed all of the available balance that was in the open space fund to make that purchase, plus a borrow against our water fund. But we got that done. The tax will continue to create a fund balance each year of about 220 to 250,000 each year after debt and other maintenance expenses are taken care of for the year. And by 2025, we expect to have about 1.6 million built back up into the fund balance for the open space. The previous board repealed the open space spending priority resolution that was adopted by a previous board in the early 2000s. And that repeal was done in 2016, I believe. So that's no longer in place. And I think this was asked to be added to the agenda just to discuss priorities, I believe, or how we should be using open space funds.
So just a question. I mean, I guess this comes to the sort of never-ending question about paying down the debt early. I mean, that's always available to us with the surplus of funds, correct? I can't remember the exact covenants of the bond, but I'm pretty sure there was no penalty for paying it down early.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
There's Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
So Matt, what's the actual, I mean, I have a peripheral topic to discuss, but is there an actual question?
You know, I don't remember who asked to add this to the agenda. It didn't happen in my list.
Well, maybe it could have been me, because here's my peripheral question.
Okay.
With the and I'll just be blunt, because I wasn't blunt on the other topics. For the OR Trailhead, we used open space funds to buy a bunch of concrete and to build a parking lot, correct?
That's correct. It's part of the trailhead.
Now we are talking about, and it's a big parking lot and it's beautiful. People are there every night watching the sunset. It's amazing. And what a great purchase it was. I think it should have been made arguably with general fund, but this town has a practice of using the open space fund for things beyond just land acquisition, trailheads, in this case, a parking lot. Now there's a separate conversation about layering in some additional amenities. My favorite amenity, bike rack, or a tool thing. There's a conversation about whether or not those dollars should come from the general fund and whether or not we should make budget adjustments to account for those. I firmly believe, and I say this a lot, that we are a roads first community. If we use the open space funds to build a road, to build a parking lot, it is very equitable for us to continue the use of those open space funds to build amenities for pedestrians and cyclists and visitors to enjoy the vista. And it should not, and I like the recommendation of OSAC for what the prioritization of those amenities should be, but I'm not currently supportive of pivoting those amenities to general fund dollars.
And staff would agree with you. We see the trailhead as an open space amenity, along with all the amenities that go into it, and any expenses for that amenity would come out of the open space fund.
But I believe that OSAC, there are members of OSAC that have a different opinion. But
Well, I think
perhaps
OSAC
that's
is, and I don't want to speak necessarily for OSAC, but my understanding of the general opinion of OSAC is that if OSAC's mission and mandate is really to try to put together open space acquisitions in a perfect world, we wouldn't be diluting the fund by spending on things other than acquisition.
so
Separate and apart from what the position of the board is, or what any opinion on what the fund can be used for legally. It's more
But
of a
Mark,
question
what's the legal term for that? The toothpaste is already out of the tube. We already have the precedent for doing that,
But
right?
there's
And
nothing
so
to- there's nothing to stop us from kind of saying, okay, we already did that. And I'm not saying this is the case, but we could say, hey, we made a mistake. We don't want to do that going forward. We want to, make that our policy going forward.
right.
if we
So
wanna
like just
pay
because
back
we
the-
can do something doesn't mean we should do something.
okay, that's fair. And if we're going to go down that path, then are we also going to pay back the open space fund from the general fund for the concrete parking lot that we built? Because you're right,
We could.
we could.
We could.
But along those same lines, if more dollars are coming in relative to servicing the debt, by rights, we should just be paying off the debt with any surplus funds, because that's what they're for. I mean, if we're generating more funds and we need to service the debt, and the focus of those dollars is on open space purchases, then by rights, all dollars should go to either buy more open space or pay off the note on the CenturyLink purchase immediately.
But I think what we've heard from the attorneys and from Matt and just our own reading, there's nothing that requires, the spirit is acquisition of open space. But as you provide amenities that will better enjoy that open space, that's within the spirit of that. And so the right decision and I think it was, it was this board, the right decision to build the OR trailhead and the parking lot out of the open space dollars, that was the right decision. And now the continued right decision is to build amenities, to have more people, particularly pedestrians and cyclists, enjoy that amenity. Meaning a restroom, a place to work on your bike, a picnic table, amenities.
No, I agree. I mean, it's a binary decision going forward. I mean, I'm not going to sweat what's happened already. It's in the past. On a go forward basis, if open space dollars are flowing in from the fund, we're either going to use it for the exclusive use of purchasing open space, which to me means satisfying the bond note we have, or we're going to broaden the reach of those dollars to improving trailheads and improving trail amenities. I don't know how you can have both, or I'm sorry, how you can, anyways. That's kind of what.
Also, at some point, there's going to be a time where there is no more open space within Superior to acquire, right? It'll either be developed or just not for sale, and it's not a possibility. There's no sunset on the 0.3% sales tax. So after CenturyLink is repaid, that debt is retired, we're going to continue to accrue money on an annual basis, and that fund will continue to grow. And if it could only be used to spend for acquisition purposes, and acquisition is not a possibility, then what's the point of the tax? And we really need to have a conversation about either retiring that tax and essentially like refunding the money to the taxpayers, or it can be used for alternate purposes consistent with the ballot measure that was passed back in 2001.
And I don't think this is binary. I think this can be both. I think it just comes down to priorities, and I don't want to speak for OSAC right now. I clearly I've been off of OSAC for 2 years, but back when I was on OSAC and we put forth, I think we called it the expedited trail plan, and with a recommendation to move forward with actually using open space funds to fund the construction of trails, because the conversation at that point was, listen, we do have this money sitting aside, setting there, accumulating. We've been trying to purchase open space to no avail, but we can add value to the community. We can make the open space more accessible. We can enhance the open space experience. There's going to be trail maintenance necessary within our open space. I mean, there's lots of ways these dollars can be used that go to the spirit and intent of the ballot measure. So I don't think we ever want to have the conversation where we're going to box ourselves in to the point that we can only use this money on acquisitions, because that I don't think that's the intent of what got passed in the ballot measure. With that, in that same vein, if there is an amenity that is open space related, but we have all of our funds earmarked right now for repaying debt, we can always move up that amenity and use general funds to pay for it. There's nothing saying we can't do that. It just comes down to priorities. Frankly, something I'd be interested in hearing from Kendra is whether or not we can structure a loan, an interfund loan between our general fund to our open space, and that our open space must repay an amount back to our general fund by a certain date to reimburse ourselves, because it was open space related. In theory, we would have and could have used open space dollars. So why not just structure it as a loan and we get the money back once the funds become available? I mean, it's a way to deliver on priorities now and amenities that, and hopefully recoup the funds into the general fund in the future.
I think I can just kind of speak to that. I think we've done interfund loans before. We could do interfund loans. The challenge is available revenue to be able to fund the open space fund from the general fund. To be able to have funds available to loan to the open space fund, we'd have to take from someplace, and more likely it'd be the capital fund that we would need to take from.
Right. And I'm not suggesting we do this right now. I'm just saying, like, for instance, if we wanted to build some of these amenities that OSAC is suggesting, and we wanted to actually do it in this upcoming year, if we were to do that and we were to use it from the capital fund or whatever fund we decided to do the loan from, if we structured it as a loan, it would mean that we could get it repaid by the sale, the open space sales tax revenue in the future, thus making the capital fund whole again.
Since we've done the opposite a number of times, I'm sure we could do that. The open space fund is loaned before, so there's no reason why we couldn't do the opposite, right? Of course. But there's no money, but I think Matt's point is there ain't no money unless we revisit the reserve conversation. We probably shouldn't revisit.
But my point is there's no money right now, but again, we're talking $50,000 for I mean, I don't know how much impact is suggesting. I haven't read Mark's email in its entirety or all that closely.
35,000.
35,000. So we're talking about a pittance. If we find 35,000, we want to make it happen this year, then we can structure some type of loan where just repayment 10 years down the road with interest in a single payment. That way we're not putting off any type of payment on our note or anything like that. And 10 years from now, we get $35,000 plus interest back into the capital fund. Anyway, that's all beside the point.
Right. So dumb question though, Matt, because I do want to loop back. I think there's consensus on something, but before I confirm, Matt, given the contribution on 1500 Colton from two of the three neighbors, is there additional, can we go further in debt on that open space fund?
So yeah, we're getting 3.75 million, which helps to pay back portion of the water. We still have it at balance, I believe, in the water fund that we need to pay back, even with 3.75 million. But I'd have to.
So Paul, I know you're listening out there. You don't have to answer it now, but that's the question. Can you, if we got that 3.7, 375, can we take 3.7 1.5 of the 375 and use 35,000 for something else, maybe that would be, I think that's the question. And then I think I heard mostly consensus that it's not necessarily binary. And so staff recommendation is on a case, what I heard from Matt, staff recommendation on a case-by-case basis that we use open space funds when available for purposes beyond open space acquisition, so long as it meets the following conditions. Condition 1, it serves a necessary amenity to support that open space. And 2, it goes to this board for approval.
That's correct.
So I'm
Yeah.
absolutely supportive of that.
And we have maintenance costs as well that comes out of there. And the budget amendment that you will see on Monday, the 26th, includes the request from Open Space Advisory Committee for those additional.
Sure,
amendments.
it even includes the youth corps.
Yep, that's correct.
Which oftentimes they work on the open space. So I like that. There's open space between their ears sometimes for those teenagers. Making fun of my own teenagers, not the youth corps teenagers.
Okay.
Does anybody disagree with that, that feels strongly that open space funds should only be used for the natural acquisition of open space, regardless of preservation or amenity?
I'm not going to be a like a strict, open space fund can only be used for open space purposes. But I do agree with the point that Ken made earlier about kind of prioritization, and that, just because something is attached to an open space area, that doesn't necessarily require it to be funded out of the open space fund. I think there's a case by case basis, and we have to look at the project, and there may be a time to pay for it out of the open space fund, and there may be a time to pay for it out of the general fund. I don't think absolutes is necessarily the way to look at this. I think we have the flexibility with the open space fund to do what we want and what we think is best, but that requires kind of balancing everything when we're
Right.
looking.
That's why going to the board I think is important. You're right, Mark. Well said.
Yep, and I completely agree. I'd like to see us address it on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the amenity is.
Okay, anything further? Why don't we do CARES funding update and then take a quick break? Sound good? Okay, Matt.
All right. So as everybody's aware, there's federal CARES Act funding available to municipalities in Boulder County for expenses related to the pandemic. We provided an attachment that gives you a summary of what's been spent to date and what we think is going to be available by the end of the year. And then if there was any discussion by the board on what you might want to use those funds, as you can see from the attachment, that it's we're going to use the majority of the funds that are coming to the town of Superior. If not, I would expect all of the funds by the end of the year. One of the expenses in here that we need to see by the end of the year is some of these expenses related to the parks maintenance. We've got to do cleaning and other measures for the playgrounds and stuff like that. And we're watching those expenses closely, and I think we'll probably have some additional expenses by the end of the year come for those requirements for those amenities. I think the attachment has, 36,000 we're expecting to have available by the end of the year. But it might be less than that.
Matt, quick question just to set a baseline. So the requirement for these funds is that the expenditures must be made by December 31st of this year?
that's this conservative date that we're going by. There's been some discussion amongst the cities and the county and Department of Local Affairs that might be extended into the first quarter of next year. But we want to make sure that we use these funds by the end of the year just to be safe. Unless we hear something in November that's concrete from the state or the federal government that says we have till quarter of next year.
Okay. And there's not going to be any difficulty making the purchase for the enhanced air handling in the community center or the equipment for meeting broadcasting at the community center?
No.
Okay. And then also just a question about the very top line item, business relief funds that we've expended. Does that include the C-Source marketing program, our matching funds that we discussed a couple months ago?
I'll have to double check on that. I'm not sure. I will double check on that though.
Okay. So, and I was the one who asked Matt to add this to the to tonight's agenda. I've been trying to watch these funds really closely, thinking about what other value add we can do for our residents in our town as a whole. And so far, we've done a lot for our business community and I think especially our restaurant community. But frankly, we haven't really done anything at all we've done stuff for our residents, but we haven't done anything directly with these funds to our residents from an expenditure standpoint. I've been trying to think creatively and hearing ideas at the Boulder County Consortium of Cities meetings, and then just looking at what other towns have done with these funds. I think we can do more directly for our residents. A couple of the ideas I've had, and this first one, I would need to know from I guess Matt, your perspective, and maybe even Kendra's perspective down the road, maybe establishing some type of past due fund for people who are struggling to pay their bills. I know we haven't necessarily experienced that yet, but COVID isn't over. So if we establish that fund, could that still be used into 2021? And it sounds like probably not. So maybe that's not the best use of our funds, but another thought that I've seen and put out is utilizing local businesses to provide services to our town. So I think it was a town in North Carolina. They would go to a restaurant and they would pay for an entire night's worth of meals, and anybody who showed up from the town could come in and get a free meal. So the restaurant's selling out for the entire night. All the residents are getting a free meal for those who needed it. I don't know if that's the right equation for us, but we do have a lot of businesses in town that if we were to do some type of gift card program where, let's say we were to buy a set number of gift cards at any number of participating organizations that wanted to join in, and then have residents who wanted to purchase those for, say, 50% off. That's giving the residents a half off for what they would have normally spent. We're driving business to our local business community. And one of the benefits here, and what I've been hearing, is our businesses that don't have a brick and mortar presence feel left out. And this gives them a way, if they have gift card capabilities and they can deliver their goods and services to our local community, this gives them a way to now participate in our recovery funding program. So I mean, clearly this can be refined. Plus there's a consideration of staff time and resources, and that's not to be taken lightly, but I'd like us to think about what we can do with this additional $36,000 that provides some type of direct benefit to our residents as well.
Ken, I appreciate you pulling this out, and I think staff is at some point going to stop showing me numbers, because I'm going to look at stuff like this and say, why are we using the CARES Act money on capital for 1500 Colton? I mean, I'm scratching my head on why CARES funding, which is for coronavirus aid relief and economic security, why are we using it for $70,000 worth of broadcasting equipment at 1500 Colton? Like, I'm not sure I get that.
Oh, I can explain that one, Neil, and
Sure.
I mean, maybe Matt, you can jump in, but to me that makes sense in that we're moving so many of our meetings to virtual. We've had a number of committees who have been disappointed by that, and I think anything we can do to help help ensure that meetings can continue in a virtual manner is really helpful. Now, I don't know if that was Matt's logic, but that's what makes sense in my head.
And it totally makes sense. We've got town hall, we're using Zoom. It's costing, Zoom is costing us like $6,000 a year. It's fantastic. I'm struggling with the capital expenditures, literally a fifth of, or maybe not a fifth, a sixth of our coronavirus funds for, IT stuff. I don't disagree, Laura. It's more a question of, is this the right way to help our community today, which is what CARES funding, in my mind, was supposed to do. And I really like what Ken suggested in terms of buying stuff today from our community. The broadcasting tools, it's great. It's a go forward thing. I don't disagree. It's just, I think personally that shouldn't come from the CARES funding. If it's something we really want, we should be using it from the general fund. CARES funding to me was always about pouring it into the community immediately, and preferably buying something from the community as opposed to IT equipment that's not even made in this country.
I hear you on the origin of the IT equipment. I just think a lot of residents are even struggling with, how do they access IT? How do they meet remotely? I think this provides another option, particularly if we ever do want to go back to in-person meetings. It might be possible to have a satellite location, one at 1500 Colton, one at Town Hall, allow people to spread out that way. I see this as directly related to COVID. I don't think we'd be worried about broadcasting the meetings from 1500 Colton if we had full use of Town Hall and COVID weren't a factor.
So, Neil, I think also Ken, thank you for bringing this up. I think if there's two separate questions on the table. Question one is, okay, we're going to finish the year with a surplus of, Ken, did I hear right about $36,000? Let's bring that thing to zero and see if we could help the people who we have not yet served in the community, which is the residences and potentially the work from home businesses. Separate question that Ken asked, that Neil asked, which is, hey, should we have more money available because have we properly allocated that? And I think that's an appropriate place to dig in. I'm not sure that a retreat's the appropriate place to dig in. I hadn't noticed that before you said it either, so thanks for calling that out. In response to Ken's, I think we could come up with a handful of good ideas for how to deploy this, but the six of us do not have a monopoly on the good ideas. I'd rather just tell the community that what we're basically doing right now, which is there's a surplus of money. And here's what I suggest. If you're a resident who's been adversely impacted, please let us know in confidence how you've been adversely impacted and apply for a non-recoverable $500 grant, no questions asked. If you're a work from home business, provide evidence that you're a work from home business, how you've been impacted, and apply for a $750 non-recoverable grant. And let's just spend the $36,000 as quickly as we can. But I think we should just do $500 grants and $750 grants. I personally, Ken, I think you're on the right path for a gift card, but I have not been adversely impacted, well, maybe a little bit, but I've not been materially adversely impacted financially by COVID. So I wouldn't want a gift card. I recognize that me eating the food might help the business, but if this is about, let's pivot this to the residences and the work from home businesses, let's just get out there with, a $500 grant for residences, $750 if you work from home. And yes, we can get into the details, but if you're a family of four, should it be more? If you're single, should it be less? Who cares? People are hurting. Let's put cash back in their pockets.
Yeah. And my only comment to that is I looked into some of the grants, like what you just suggested, Kevin, that have been done across the state. 500 and 750 are really high on that end. What I've seen more is 100, 200, 300. And usually it comes in the form of like a card to a grocery store, something like that. Just because it's easier to deal with. You're not dealing with bank accounts or having to actually write checks or anything. It's a much easier transactionary process. So I agree. I actually do like that. I think that's a great idea. Just thinking $36,000 divided by 500, we're probably going to have a higher need, a higher number of people come in with applications than we're going to have money for. So maybe if we just, let's not put a set dollar on it. Let's see what our applications come in, and then let's figure out how we can put the money out from there.
That's not a bad idea. Just grants, grants up to $500. Tell us what you need. Give it, open it a 14-day window. And then Matt, I like, and I actually like if we maybe partner with the chamber on this, but, I don't want to overwhelm Matt's staff with this. It's not appropriate for us to evaluate our neighbors, right? But some independent evaluation.
And that was my biggest concern that I hadn't figured out how to get around. That this is going to be a big ask on staff time. So I need Matt's opinion on how we make this happen.
Or the other thing we could do is just throw the $36,000 to some Boulder County housing assistance program and say, if you're having rent or mortgage trouble, please call this number and use the code Superior to have your rent paid. Because there are Boulder County assistance programs for rent and utility and things like that. And we could just give the money to them and let them disperse the funds.
Yeah, I mean, from a staff management perspective, I like that idea.
And we leverage, their existing expertise to do what they've been doing for some time. That's a, in my mind, a very viable solution.
Ken, is
So
there
we already
somebody at
give
the
Coal
consortium
Creek
that-
Meals on Wheels, annual contributions.
We do, yeah. But it's,
Maybe we could start with them. I don't know if they've already gotten additional, funding from the federal government. Who knows?
yeah, we can reach out to the community organizations that we already give contributions to. There's and touch base with them and get their thoughts on it.
But I think the consensus, Matt, is let's spend the 36,000. Let's get it to the businesses and to the residences and the home-based businesses, and find a way to do it. And I think two ideas. Let's have, Ken maybe broker a conversation with the consortium, tell them the consensus, and then go to Meals on Wheels and say, can we, Meals on Wheels has 8 or 10 customers. By the way, for those that are watching, Meals on Wheels is not a charity program. You may purchase your meal for $12. Coal Creek Meals on Wheels. Clint's going to give the URL right now in case you're watching. Clint, how does somebody get in touch with Coal Creek Meals on Wheels?
ccmow.org, I believe, is their website.
Perfect. Great program. Not a charity. If you buy their meals for $12 or $14, whatever they cost, you are doing them a favor. So please consider that. I think those.
I just want to chime in. The full cost of a meal is actually only $7 per meal. So it's extremely affordable. And if you are able to pay that $7 per meal, that also helps subsidize other people. So you are helping them out by doing that.
Thank you.
Correction. It's
right.
Coal Creek. Correction. It's coalcreekmow.org.
coalcreekmow.org. Great. So I think those are two great ideas, Matt. Let's figure out, but let's land this airplane with, on fumes, man. And then separately, it sounds like Ken wants to have a conversation. Neil wants to have a conversation about the AV funds.
If we get back in, we're sitting next to each other. This is only going to get worse with the Ken and Neil mix-ups. But yeah, I want to just understand the use of the funds.
You guys are sitting next to me on my screen, by the way. That's why I keep doing it.
Move us around. I want to understand, the trade-off here of buying capital for a building that's not even yet operational versus pouring it into the community today.
So I'm a little confused on where we all just netted out. Is the idea that we're going to now solicit suggestions from the community and then take it from there?
Well, I'll tell you what I heard. I heard that Matt's staff probably can't handle this, so we need to look at a facilitator. The two ideas we came up with were Ken talking to consortium of cities see if they have an idea through Boulder County or something else. Maybe we give the money to some housing assistance. And option two, Meals on Wheels, can we give them an increased grant? Would that help for COVID assistance? But consensus, help the residents and home-based businesses. It's not easy to get the money to them without spending half the money on the administrative side,
And
which we should not do.
right. And I think there's a third. I think Matt was going to reach out with all the service organizations we have established. I don't know if that covered everything and what Kevin said, but we're going to look at all of them. But the last thing I'll say, into both Neil's point, is that how do we prioritize this fund, and should we actually have had more money to be spending on residents right now? When we approved, what was it, $290,000 at the beginning of COVID, we didn't know CARES Act existed. So in my mind, that was a Christmas present to the town, because we were going to spend that money. So if we end up going over this $36,000 to our community, that's not the end of the world. We've already gotten a present back to us. Let's continue to push it out. And I'm not saying we need to go find another $290,000 to spend beyond this 36, but if we go beyond 36, that's not the end of the world to me.
I couldn't agree more. I completely agree.
And also, even something like, I would pay every home-based business, maybe TJ's got an idea here. Do we get every home-based business in the town of Superior a comped membership to the Superior Chamber of Commerce for 2021 to use as networking? So that serves a couple purposes, right? That helps the home-based businesses. That gives TJ much needed revenue.
I love that
But
idea.
think,
yeah.
A great idea.
While I certainly want to support home-based businesses, a big part of what I'm thinking about is how can we make sure it benefits the town? And a lot of home-based businesses just don't benefit the town as much. So I think that's a perfect solution. It helps the home-based businesses, but it also invests money in Superior. It's a win-win.
Yeah, I think that's in line with, that's a lot more in line with what we've done for restaurants. And so, yeah, that really spreads it out more in Superior based businesses. So I like that. Good suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All good ideas. So we'll start working on this.
Yeah, TJ, Matt, I obviously have a little passion about this too. So my free time, maybe I'm happy to help. Maybe you'll call with me, you TJ. Love to see if I can help.
Sounds good.
Okay, how about anything further?
Thinking it would be. That was awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, good.
Thanks for bringing that up, Ken.
Anything further on this item before we take a break? All right, let's take a break and be back in 5 minutes or so. right, looks like everyone's back. Let's get started again. We are on to item G, renewable energy goals.
So this was my request. Had a couple thoughts. So we talked previously about adopting renewable energy goals. We talked previously about the possibility for the town, not necessarily installing like solar on all buildings, but there's the possibility of subscribing to a renewable energy connect type program that Excel already offers. I believe the numbers that we looked at previously was like something like a $50,000 delta between what we're currently paying and if we wanted to actually just flip the switch and then be able to actually power the town with renewables. And then talking about capital improvement projects like town hall expansion, if we're going to do something like that, I thought it would be an appropriate conversation to have to potentially put solar panels on whatever annex we're going to be building. And really, I just want us to have a more concrete plan that we can explain to the residents and hold ourselves accountable to as to when we're all going to once and for all be powering town facilities by renewable energy. I think we're all philosophically aligned in terms of agreeing that this is something that we want to work towards. So what I would like to see the board do is actually set a actual goal and then execute on that goal. One of the things that I've been campaigning on is, frankly, I would like the town to be powered by renewable energy, all town facilities powered by renewable energy by the end of 2022. I think that that's doable, but I'm not necessarily, suggesting that necessarily needs to be the answer. There's a number of different ways that we can get to this, but I think that if we don't actually commit to a tangible and attainable goal, it's going to be something that continues to be something that is talked about, but never really executed on. And I just want us to once and for all commit to doing something that is, realistic and achievable, but at the same time, aggressive enough that, we actually have to move on it.
Go ahead.
All right. I'll keep my comments quick. I love that. I love making it aggressive and going for 2022. Another thing, I know earlier we were talking about how we have the election coming up and our board may change a little bit. I would just ask that, doing this by 2022 means it mostly will be in the purview of the people on this board. I love setting that as a goal, but I want us to not be afraid to miss it if, for example, another priority comes up that we can't foresee, that, maybe we get 90% of the way there by 2022. And I think that's okay.
So, Mark, I think you're spot on in terms of thinking about potential town hall expansion, but I think we got to think way more beyond just solar. Energy consumption is just one of the vectors when it comes to just reducing your footprint. If you think about it, the insulation that we use, let's reduce the energy usage. Let's not worry about solar panels so much as take the existing footprint and find the things that we need to do to change it. As you expand town hall, why not bring in the gray water for the toilets? There's so many things that we could do to think seriously about making it a LEED certified building at the front end, rather than trying to retroactively, change it later. I think solar panels, solar energy, it's one step, but I think we got to put everything on the table on how do we make that building hell, there's so many things that we could do beyond the energy. And I think, a specific target for 2021, 2022 is absolutely reasonable, so that when we're considering the concept of the building, it's all incorporated on day one.
So just real quick, are we talking, and the staff memo was oriented more towards town hall expansion. Mark, are you talking about all town facilities, or are we keeping this more narrowed towards town hall?
That's a good point.
So the goal that I want is I want all town facilities to be powered by renewable energy, ideally by 2022. I think, to Neil's point, as we're going through the design and planning stages of the town hall expansion, I agree completely. The architect that's hired should be looking at, any and all ways to make it LEED certified, to fix the insulation, to, make sure that the windows are, properly insulated, all the things that, allow a structure like town hall to, be less energy efficient should be addressed as we're spending a bunch of money on the expansion. But yeah, to Ken, to your question, my original thought about this agenda topic was, we've had this discussion kind of broadly about powering by renewables, but we haven't necessarily anchored ourselves to any specific, concrete goal. And I just want us to do that once and for all. I agree with Laura's suggestion. Obviously, we have a new board coming in after the election. This is kind of similar to the goals that we talked about earlier. I certainly want to hear if I'm still on the board, but even if I'm not, and I'm just in the public, I want to know what the new board members say about this goal. But I just think that this is a really important goal, and it's one that, if we don't set a measurable goal and date as to when we're going to achieve it by, it's not going to get achieved. So we just need to, frankly, just arbitrarily pick something and then shoot for it.
So and I appreciate you bringing this up. I always appreciate that you've been pushing to have this on our work session agendas, because it keeps it front of mind, which is critically important. I come with a little bit of a different perspective on it, though. My preference would be not to try to pick a date. 2022, if we can do that, that'd be fantastic. And I would love to shoot for that goal. I have no idea, A, if that's a realistic goal, or B, if our limited resources and energies towards improving our sustainability measures is best utilized solely on making our town renewable, 100% renewable. We're going to see in the coming year a plethora of goals from a sustainability perspective from ACES. We have a new sustainability person we're going to be hiring in 2021. I want to hear from that person. I want to hear how we can make the biggest bang for our buck, and what type of roadmap they can pull together to get us there, and then pulling in what ACES develops and what they hear from the community in their upcoming outreach. So I love the idea. I want an aggressive timeline. I want an aggressive goal. I just don't know if this is the right goal, because I haven't heard from our experts yet. And I want us to hear from our experts before we put anything on paper or in concrete or stone that holds us to it.
Yeah, I like that suggestion, Ken. Thanks. I would second that.
On the flip side, I think it will be helpful when we hire our sustainability manager for that person to come into the role knowing that the board has already had and articulated expectations about, what we want to do. And ultimately we're like the board of directors kind of directing the strategy. And now we're hiring the people to actually execute on those decisions. Right. And so I'm all ears for, experts to come in and say, this is what you can do and should do. But I think if we already have, an expectation as to, there's a lot of ways to get to this, I think, to solve this problem. And I think for us to have an expectation that we're going to address it by a certain point in time, is frankly, for the person who's coming into that role, it kind of sets our expectations of them, and then they understand kind of what they need to execute on. So I'm certainly all ears for other creative suggestions and solutions, but I don't want to just keep kicking the can down the road and not having like a date on it where we're not actually going to make any real progress.
I'm having Wi-Fi issues, so apologies if I'm in and out. You guys give me a thumbs up. You can hear me? Okay, perfect. Why not just sign on? And I know it falls well short of what you want, Mark, but why not just declare us the Ready for 100 Sierra Club initiative, which is 100% clean energy by 2035. And then that's the out year. And then we could start backing it in with the experts. And I think generally most of us agree that we don't want to set an unrealistic goal. I worry about 2022. Can we meet it? And I just don't know, because I'm certainly no expert here. But why not just adopt a standard like hundreds of other communities across the nation have adopted, to be Ready for 100 Sierra Club by 2035? And then that gets us access to those resources from the Sierra Club and puts us out there as a leader, because I don't think anybody else in I'm not sure other communities in Northern Colorado have done this yet. So it is, while it's a relatively small step because it's 2035, it's a big step compared to some of the other neighboring communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good starting point, and I don't see any harm in doing that. At the same time, I think that we are actually positioned in a way, one of the benefits of being a town of just 4 square miles is that we could actually be more aggressive and, actually executing on something that's achievable. Whereas, the city and county of Denver, if they wanted to do something like this, I mean, how many facilities do they have? Like, it's a much, the bigger you are, the harder the problem is. And we're small and nimble enough that I think that we could actually execute it. And I mean, to the briefing that we already got, I mean, if we wanted to just flip the switch and do the $50,000 delta, we could be powered by renewables tomorrow.
I think that might be, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I think the wastewater treatment plant is going to have an issue with that.
No, it's the way that we purchase the energy. I mean, the energy is being purchased by through the Renewable Connect program, or whatever the analog was for government purchasing of the energy. But I mean, you could do that for your home tomorrow as well. Like you buy it from Xcel and you're getting it powered by wind and solar.
And I think, so again, Mark, you bring up a really good point of, we've got this person coming in, the board of directors setting the expectations, then it's them on to implement. What I want to hear though is, I mean, a work plan and a way to get there. I think we've set the expectation that putting the town on 100% renewables is a priority. It's on them to figure out how they tell us, how do we do it, and what is the best way to do it. I am not an expert in this area, and yes, we could spend that money and flip the switch and do it, but is that the best use of our limited resources towards all of our sustainability goals? I want somebody who's actually an expert in this area to take a look at it. And yeah, I have a very high expectation that we get midway through the year, if not sooner, and we have a presentation from that person. I want to hear what's going on. What is that roadmap? What are we going to accomplish? What are the goals we're working towards? When are we going to get those goals? And what are the mechanisms to get us there? And then we hold ourselves to that. I want to have a set goal. I just don't know what that goal is now. And I'm afraid 2022, I don't want to communicate bad information to our residents. I don't want our residents to think, wow, we're actually going to get this done by 2022, if that's not realistic, or if we're going to plow more money into this that we could have been plowing into other sustainability measures and making a bigger impact.
So at the risk of telling Matt how to do his job and what staff need to do, Matt, I'm wondering, would it be reasonable for us to say that for us to kind of ask that the first task of the sustainability analyst be to put together a 1-3-5 roadmap of what are our goals for 2021, what are our goals for the 2 years after that, and what are our goals for kind of the 5-year goals, and kind of just make an agreement that we want to have that done by March so we can use that going forward, and cite Mark's idea of all renewable by 2022 as something that we'd like, but we're open to suggestion.
Yeah, the plan is to get the sustainability analyst hired no later than February, have them hit the ground running. They'll look at what we've done in the past, what we've done to date. We have solar systems on most of all of our facilities, including the plants right now. We've done some building upgrades, the town hall, the wastewater treatment plant, water treatment. So we've done a number of things already. So they'll take a look at that. They'll take a look at what the consultant has done for us as far as an analysis of our consumption. And then they'll start putting together the roadmap, just like you said. And I think what my message to them is this board likes to be aggressive, wants to be aggressive in this field. And if we can put a plan in place to have some short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, then we'll put that in front of you, and as well as put that in front of the committee and get a plan in place and start working towards it.
I think I kind of do agree with Mark about, let's take a bold step now. Let's just say 2022, 2023. And the analyst to come on and tell us this may not be possible and here's the reasons why, or this is possible and here's the reason you can do it. I don't see any more reason to just, kick this off another 6 months just to set a goal.
I won't support that, and my reason is because I don't want to set bad expectations to the community. I just want to set bad expectations.
I just don't want to back off of it,
Well, then let's set a more reasonable goal that's still aggressive, 2024. I don't know. There's no reason why you can't do it in 4 years.
Let's just start until we understand what the goal is and what we're trying to do. And we just start with signing up for the Sierra Club Ready for 100, which is probably what we should have done last year.
I think to Mark's point, though, with what we saw in the sustainability report, we could have chosen in the budget this year to add an extra 50,000 to buy all of our energy that we don't already produce from solar, from renewable for $50,000, and we could have said we're done. We have achieved 100% renewable energy, and then there's still more things we need to do to reduce our energy. But for meeting the first goal about going renewable, we could have been there already for 2021. And that was a decision we chose not to make that decision for 21 because we don't even have a goal. We just say we want to do it, and pushing it out on someone else's timeline, I think, just deprives us the ability to start making progress on other things as well. So I agree. I don't want a goal that we have no chance of hitting, but this is one we could have already hit.
I agree. And I think 2035 it's a generation away.
I'm not suggesting that we push this for the next 15 years. I'm suggesting that there's more to do than just purchase clean energy. I think it's, everything from our fleet of vehicles to the investments we need to make in town hall, the investments we need to make in the wastewater treatment plant. Do we redirect the gray water? I think it's a series of investments, and it's not just, let's just purchase, let's just, not make the Excel 50,000 and wash your hands of it. I want a more methodical plan for how we're going to achieve this as a community.
And I wasn't suggesting that, we just purchase the energy through Renewable Connect and be done with it. To the contrary, I kind of feel like that's like a grounding, first step towards a larger policy change in the board's kind of direction, to show that, we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. We're actually going to, commit to doing this. We're hiring the sustainability analyst. That's a great step. The next step in my mind is, let's buy our energy from renewable sources. And then, let's have the longer strategic conversation about, okay, let's buy our vehicles that are electric vehicles only when we can. Let's look at the gray water system. Let's look at all these other things, like, let's leverage federal and state grants, for our community to encourage people to put, solar on the roofs. But I think that we can have that bigger impact by taking a first kind of incremental step and just saying, okay, this is a commitment that we're making, and this is how we're going to start to achieve it. And I'm fine also, frankly, by hiring a sustainability analyst, I think that that's actually a press-worthy event. I certainly want to meet that person when he or she is hired. Coming to the board, not only are we budgeting for their salary, but as an announcement and as a commitment to show that we're serious. If we then decided to opt into the Renewable Connect at that point in time, I think that would also make sense. at that point in time. But I think we just need to be, strategic and really think about it. But I still remain committed to the idea that having a goal and an aggressive one, not 2035, something that's 2-3 years out, it makes it real. And otherwise, things can just get kind of pushed to the distant, future. And well, why worry about tomorrow when we've got all these other problems today? But also, this is one of those conversations that I think needs to happen with the new board. So my request is that it be incorporated into the goals and that it's actually executed and that goal be very aggressive.
Okay, can we agree to put this on the first quarter's work session? Is that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Assuming I'm on the board for the first quarter working session, I'd like to see us sign up for the Sierra Club Ready for 100 next meeting. I don't know why we didn't do it. I recognize it's 2035. I don't think one replaces another. I think it's something we should have done previously, and I'd like to see us do it immediately. So.
Okay, would others support that? I mean, that's one of those things I think that if we put it up there, we ought to do it versus having a pull it off the agenda and have a 30-minute conversation on. I would support it. Well, I'm assuming this is the first I want to read through it.
There's a lot of information about it.
Concept.
So I learned about it through the election process just because they educated us on it. But you could just Google Ready for 100. So maybe get in touch with Matt offline if you'd like to support it. But okay. I'll look for a second offline.
Okay. All right. Let's move on then to item H, which is affordable housing discussion about engaging with Brixmor and RTD about partnering on redevelopment at the marketplace to include some residential with affordable housing.
So this was also my ask. Matt has informed me that there's been some discussions going on in the background, which I guess he can kind of talk about. But I think in light of the ordinance that we just adopted, I want us to keep our foot on the gas here. And, I really want to have the conversation with Brixmor, with RTD, about, doing some transit-oriented development in the marketplace. I think the marketplace is ripe for an infusion of capital in terms of a redevelopment plan. And if we can get residential into the marketplace within walking distance of the RTD bus stop, post COVID, once people are actually comfortable taking the bus again, I think that's just a win-win for the town in terms of delivering on a significant amount of affordable housing to get us to that 12% commitment that we've signed on for. And then also it'll just inject life into the marketplace by having, pedestrians within walking distance of all the shops and restaurants in the marketplace. So I think that having the discussion with Brixmor and possibly with RTD to let them know that we're serious and that we want to partner with them, I think would be really beneficial. So we had last time we had a conversation with Brixmor, I think we touched on this a little bit, and they kind of seemed open to the idea of infilling some of the lesser desirable commercial pads there that are already struggling, and redeveloping those into some residential component. But I think that in order to make something like this happen, we need to continue to have the conversation to let Brixmor know that the board is directionally supportive of this kind of project. Maybe a little pie in the sky at the same time, because obviously it's going to require their time and their money to put something like this together. But I think if we're thinking big picture, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, in terms of what's going to make Superior successful and the marketplace successful, I think that this could be a critical component of that.
Yeah, Mark, I fully agree. I was a little confused because I saw Brixmor's logo on here, And when Adam and I joined with Matthew Berger back at the end of August, this is just not on their radar. You know, they acknowledge that the marketplace is not well laid out. There's way too much parking, and they acknowledge that, you know, redevelopment should happen there. But I think and I didn't write down, I don't have very good notes, but I think the point what they were looking at is, you know, with where they're going to deploy their capital, this was not the spot. However, if something has changed, or if not, I'm fully on board with, I think we all acknowledge the marketplace is way more asphalt than it needs to be. And it needs everything, you know, thrown at it to try to get it to something that can be more functional for the community. And affordable housing is just, you know, is another key piece of that.
So just information for the board. There's a development company that's been having conversations with Brixmor about redevelopment portion of the marketplace. There's also a separate development company that's been in discussions with RTD for their site as well. So we have two companies. Brixmor needs some pushing. They are being kind of dragging their feet. I would agree with Neil on that. But
Matt, what's the history?
There's
What's the history in the document we're looking at? 350 something units.
That was Brixmor coming. That was something Brixmor put together internally. They engaged an outside firm. That was something that they started working on after their last meeting with the town board, when Matt Berger came and met with the board.
And that was,
when did we get this?
That was pre-COVID, wasn't it? I mean, because
that was pre-COVID.
We saw this in January in Los Angeles when we were there.
Yeah.
We met with Matt Berger then. We saw
All right, I've never seen this before.
Yeah,
so
it's never coming to the board.
Right. Yeah. And they asked me not to share because it wasn't a final document, but I haven't heard from them, so I included it. You know, I was like, so. But
so we put it on the internet.
So they have a company that they have been working with, a development company. But the development company seems really interested. Brixmor, not so much, and we're still trying to figure out what the delay is there. So, and that was as recent as couple weeks to a month ago that we had that update.
So I mean, I'll go. I hadn't seen this. I spent a little bit of time with it this afternoon, not as much time as I'd like. I fully support a mixed use redevelopment project. I think it's perfect, and would support doing what is necessary. You know, obviously the next board would make the decision, but doing what's necessary, including, you know, if we need to create separate districts, which, you know, to help pay for some of the infrastructure. For me, to Neil's point, way too much asphalt. Absolutely, the only, you know, some type of mixed use is necessary, and I have no problem with something the size of 350 units.
I could add one more thing to what Kevin said. You know, I think the challenge we're always going to have is, you know, stuff like this gets thrown on a piece of paper, and then, you know, we're like, yeah, this is great, but how do we make it happen? I mean, what is it that we need to do to push Brixmor off the ledge? And we've danced around the concept of incentives, but I am all for throwing whatever incentives we need to make this thing happen. Because this is something like this would be a huge win for Superior. And, you know, the challenge we always have is we just let the developers kind of, you know, putz along and do what they want to do. But this is our destiny for us to just push Brixmor and just tear out the 1,000 acres of parking spaces that are always empty. And I think the finance committee, we're going to talk a little bit about some incentives, but I think as a board, you know, what is it that this needs to happen? You know?
Yeah, I think this is one. So I didn't like the incentives for hotel reducing the occupancy tax on the other side of town. The proposed hotel behind IHOP, that's a perfect extended stay style hotel. And, you know, I would need Adam and the consultants to tell me what an appropriate incentive would be. But yeah, we could cut the occupancy tax for 20 years by half on that.
So my comment to Brixmor on this plan that was circulated tonight was that I thought a hotel adjacent to the RTD lot was a complete missed opportunity. I mean, that to me should be, if affordable housing development is just a natural at that location. So a hotel there just does not make sense to me. So that was my feedback to them. I mean, this was just a very preliminary drawing that they came to us with, and so that was, going back, I've met with Brixmor now with Matt over 6 years, and the good news is when I started as mayor in 2014, the dialogue was, we don't do residential, not our thing. We do shopping centers. Thank you. And then it evolved over the last 6 years to, yes, we now do it, and we actually like it in some locations. And so that's kind of how it's evolved. Now, that was pre-COVID. I think right now they are dealing with those fires, as it were, and that's going to be, I mean, they're in crisis mode in a lot of centers. Fortunately, the marketplace is not one of them. So I think if we want anything to happen here, we're gonna have to drive it, and I think they would be a partner in it, but I don't think expecting them to drive it is just not going to happen. So I think our market as a whole is doing relatively well through this. Housing remains strong, jobs remain strong. And so I think there is development money out there and developers that would like to do projects, but we're going to have to take the town are going to have to take a more active role than we might have otherwise.
And I agree with everything you said. And I think we will take an active role with the economic development ad for next year. And I stay in a lot of hotels, right? Back in normal times. And a hotel that is next to public transportation, particularly an extended stay style hotel that was, one bus stop away from CU, is pretty attractive. So yeah, we did look at that as a TOD that included affordable housing element, but I think that is a pretty attractive spot for a hotel, because a lot of people that, are going to be, vehicles are going to change, right? There's a lot of, with access to Uber and Lyft, I think it's a really good spot for a hotel. So, but I'm certainly no expert. Laura, I know you sort of do this for a living. I'd like your thoughts on it. And you certainly stay in a lot of hotels in normal times, but I actually didn't hate that spot as a hotel.
I'll just say the last point that I want to make on this is just SURA. We've got SURA. This is exactly what SURA was set up to do. It's the Superior Urban Renewal Authority. And, people can have a discussion as to whether or not the town center was the proper use of SURA, but it was. And, but it's meant to, urban renewal authorities are meant to deal with blighted areas, to redevelop otherwise undevelopable or struggling areas. And, the idea of kind of paving over or plowing up some unused asphalt and really invigorating this into something different is, I think, an appropriate use of SURA and all of the powers that come with SURA.
I think my only hesitation with the hotel thing is really just the potential competition across the street with the Element. I really question how many hotels our town can support. And I think this would be a slightly more ideal location in that it's closer to public transportation, but I want to make sure we're not cannibalizing the Element to do so.
I think as long as the occupancy numbers make sense, that's when the hotels, that's when they come. I mean, our market right now is not conducive to more hotels, but I mean, the spot right next to the Element is slated as for another hotel. So they don't have any problem co-locating next to each other, but they build when the occupancy numbers say it's time to build. I think our market I think the Element's doing well because it's a new hotel, and most of the other hotels in the immediate area are not new hotels. And so it's doing well because there was pre-COVID. And it seems like their numbers are bouncing back. We actually stayed there a few weeks ago, and they talk of coming back pretty well.
I mean, I think part of my concern is also just seeing the hotel industry as a whole. Most hoteliers are not looking to build new properties. So while the property next to the Element was slated as a hotel, I wouldn't expect that we'll actually get a hotel there for several years. In general, with the travel industry, I mean, everything I'm reading, we're looking at 4 to 6 years before demand really returns. And that's really 4 to 6 years for leisure travel to fully return. I mean, there's a lot of talk that business travel, it may never return. We're all learning how to use Zoom, which is decreasing the need for in-person meetings in the future. And just looking at how many companies aren't going to be willing to pay for corporate travel when they've learned that they can get most things done via Zoom. This is this is a huge disruption event for the travel and transportation industry as a whole. And it's one that I think if I were a hotelier, I would certainly not be breaking ground on a new property right now.
No, I think you're right. We're in new territory with a lot of segments, and hotels are one of them. So, okay, well, it sounds like the direction from the board, those that have spoken, is yes, we're interested in some type of redevelopment at the marketplace, and yes, let's make this a priority.
Yeah, I mean, Clint, you said something pretty good. I mean, in the sense that, Brixmor's not going to drive this. This is going to be on us. And this gets back to, our 2021 priorities. This would be a huge one for me to just make small progress, even big progress on this. I mean, this is something we've all talked about for a long time, and seeing some progress on this would be very important.
I would also just like to communicate to Brixmor that, we do have Sura, and let them know about Sura. I mean, they should know about Sura already, but recognize that there's a possibility to potentially leverage Sura to make something happen that the market wouldn't necessarily just make happen.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Discussion of OSAC request to contact Conservation Fund about the Zaharias property.
So this is just real quick. At the OSAC meeting this past Wednesday, there was kind of a discussion about how the Conservation Fund and Justin Spring, were instrumental in helping us acquire the CenturyLink property. And while there is no development application pending on the Zaharias property, OSAC would be interested in at least starting a conversation with Justin to see if there's any potential for an acquisition of some or all of the Zaharias property. One of the things that OSAC was particularly excited about was really going after new sources of money and, seeing, what they could really take advantage of in terms of grants. I think the thought was that, we had reached out to GOCO and to, there was another grant fund, conservation fund, I guess it was, to see what sort of grants are available, but there are nationwide grant opportunities and other grants that, may not have necessarily been explored. So they were really excited about potentially starting that conversation to see if there was any appetite for a potential acquisition related to CenturyLink. They are mindful of, what the reserves look like now post CenturyLink acquisition. But they're also really excited with Jeffco and Boulder County's generous contribution towards the conservation easement that was placed just this past week. So they recognize that there is going to be money coming in, even with the debt service, that we are going to start getting some money into our coffers. And if there's any opportunity to potentially put together a transaction, they wanted to at least have that conversation with Justin to see what he thought, and they didn't want to go rogue. So they wanted to at least take our temperature on that. So I'm generally supportive of OSAC doing whatever they can to help facilitate their mission, which is to expand and preserve open space in Superior. So I like the idea, but at the same time, like if there's an application that's pending and there's a reason for them to hit the brakes, I think that they should just know that sooner rather than later. So.
During the last application, there was certainly a big call from residents to purchase this property. So I think any information that could be obtained to provide answers one way or the other is certainly okay. I support the effort. I think I know what the outcome will be, but that's what looking into it further will determine.
Yeah, I totally support, checking with everybody out there, who else might be able to throw something in to help acquire it.
I think what I would do is invite Justin or one of the reps from Conservation Plan to attend an open space advisory meeting, so it's in public, and just at one of their meetings would probably be the best process.
That sounds great.
No objection from me.
Okay, anything else? All right, next is, and just to check in on time, we put in 9 p.m. adjourn time and we're now at 9:01. We've got 2 other items. Are we good? Just knocking these 2 out? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Item J, letter to Jefferson County Commissioners. Board member requests that town send a letter to Jefferson County Commissioners requesting them to consider adopting landing fees at RMMA.
So this is my last agenda item on the work session. So this is just real quick and simple. Kind of what I'm contemplating right now is a letter from all 6 of us or 7 of us, once we actually have a full board post election, sent to the Board of County Commissioners for Jefferson County, explaining, first confirming and then explaining that RMMA is an anomaly insofar as it is a general aviation airport that does not charge landing fees, and that Jefferson County is leaving revenue on the table, and that communities that have imposed landing fees have done so, not only for financial reasons to, help the operator of the airport, but also to address noise concerns for neighboring communities, because there's an economic disincentive every time you take off on land. So most airports, general aviation airports, do impose landing fees. I was actually talking to somebody who worked a career in aviation who remarked, just wait a second, RMMA doesn't have any landing fees. Like it was just, and they worked in airport administration. So it was something that struck them as particularly odd. So I think we could do it in one of 2 ways. We could either send it directly to Boulder County Commissioners, or we could also send it first via the Board of County Commissioners for Boulder and ask them to join in part with that letter as a signatory to it, potentially, as it might have more weight coming from the county commissioners. But I just think that we should make the request public because I think it'll work. And if we don't try, we have residents who are exasperated by the impacts of aircraft noise. And, you know, it's not the forest fighting planes that people are bothered by at all.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what the community is bothered by. And I think that right now the airport roundtable is a good first step. Working with the consultants has been a good first step, but there has been little tangible action that we can show because, you know, obviously our hands are tied. We don't own the airport and we don't have any authority over it. But we do have a voice and we can speak to our fellow electeds, explain the plight of our citizens, and ask for help as a good neighbor. And so that's what I'm asking this board to do.
So Mark, I'll go next. A few things. First, we've had just a terrible 6 weeks in Colorado, and the last few days have been scary. I mean, just where we were, anybody that was in town on Saturday and just looking up the hill in the Boulder and seeing how close the fires were, absolutely terrible. And so just to reinforce what you said, you know, the slurry bombers and the air support for the firefighters is welcomed and encouraged. And I don't care how frequent or loud those guys are, let's bring them in and let's keep the community safe. 100%, absolutely. Second, backing up to what I said earlier, in that one of the frustrations I have about the engagement with the consultants are we never really had a key strategy that we identified that, okay, go do this, go execute on this. And the idea of some economic incentive, disincentive, whatever you want, that might have an influence around the touch and goes in particular. And the survey we did told us that for the Rock Creek residents in particular, the touch and goes were particularly bothersome. I think it's great and should absolutely be pursued. Of course, we have no authority. We've gotten a bunch of letters emails over the last few days. Of course, we have no authority over the airport. And that's exactly what you're suggesting, which is, I think what you're suggesting is, let's, you know, the table that we received from the consultants was hastily pulled together at the request of you and I before we went to meet with the airport just to get some data. I think we need to build out that table a little bit more, understand not just anecdotal evidence of we knew somebody that worked at an airport and they're surprised RMA didn't have landing fees, but let's, I don't want to say commission a study because that sounds like a very expensive government thing to do, but maybe get a little bit more data than the anecdotal data and the table that was pulled together hastily. And then my third point is I'm absolutely supportive of a letter to the commissioners saying this is what you should support. This is what you should consider, excuse me. But of course, like everything, the devil's in the details. But I think starting that and having some idea of here's a strategy that may actually move the needle and can make a difference, and let's anchor to something we could execute on. Yeah, that's exactly what we asked the consultants to do 18 months ago. So very supportive of that strategy. But again, let's just get the data to make sure that we're not asking RMA to do something that is out of the norm. And I don't think it is. And let's just make sure that as we draft the letter, we've appropriately set the tone in, you know, as I've said, I don't want to escalate. This is, we're neighbors. Just as I've used this analogy, if you've got a neighbor that's doing something you don't like, you don't call the police, you don't bang on the door with hostility. You knock on the door, you bring them a cup of coffee and a muffin and say, hey, let's talk about this. So the letter, I want to just set the appropriate tone. You know, hopefully you're aware this is something that other communities have done, and maybe as a result, there's some positive outcome that could come out of that. But I think it's a great idea and support it. And thank you for putting this. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, I think, in these retreat work session things, coming up with ideas like that.
Others?
So I I appreciate the further conversation because this is a topic that has, for whatever reason, had very little traction over the year. Obviously, part of it due to COVID, part due to trying to organize however many different jurisdictions to work on the roundtable. And frankly, I I am fine with us sending a letter to Jefferson County, but I don't want to presuppose any solutions to them. I don't want to suggest to them that they add these types of incentives or disincentives to the flight community. I mean, if there's one thing that's clear to me, it's that this is a hot button for the flight, the pilot community. As we enter the roundtable, I don't want us to do anything that will poison the well in having open and collegial conversations with all parties involved. If we want to send a letter that says, listen, we have residents who are impacted daily, and we hear about this probably as the most often brought up topic of any topic in our town. This is a real issue that we're trying to solve. We're really looking forward to a collaborative relationship in trying to figure out a solution. By all means, I want to open the door. I want to set the stage for a good conversation. I don't want us to go in there and try to tell Jefferson County how they should operate their airport. That I think can set people off and on edge. Kevin, I appreciate your comments around making sure that it's the right tone. I think it's very difficult to write the proper tone for a letter where we tell them what the solution is for managing their airport. I just want us to tread very lightly and very carefully. So if we want to send an opening salvo, by all means, that's terrific. But I don't want to send any that presuppose a solution outside of the roundtable and potentially put people on edge and create an antagonistic relationship prior to anything even starting.
And I'm not suggesting that we're going to tell them how to run their airport or tell them how to do their job, but people have limited attention spans. We have, very rarely drafted letters from the board and sent them to other governmental organizations. So I don't want us to be, I don't want us to obscure anything that we're trying to deal with, right? And yeah, I mean, sure, I don't want to poison any well or anything like that. And I'm not trying to say like we need to go in there and pick a fight. But, and I'm open to any and all solutions. All I know is that we have residents in our community that are like, this is absolutely like the worst it has ever been. Some people are leaving town because of it. And, objectively, it has gotten so much worse that if we don't say, explore any and all solutions to this, including but not limited to, the imposition of landing fees. Oh, by the way, did you know that other jurisdictions, similar to Jefferson County, have adopted landing fees to address a number of issues? It's, one way to potentially solve this problem. By no means is it the only one, but I don't want us to not make an ask where there is kind of a reason to make that ask, because I don't want to get into like a letter writing campaign, and I don't want this to just be a letter from a neighbor saying, hey, do you know that there's an airport that's affecting our residents? Can you do something about it? If we have a suggestion, I think we should make it.
And is that not what the purpose of the roundtable is? I mean, I want to have the conversation. I want us to make those suggestions, but I don't want anybody to get the impression we are going outside and around the forum with which we are actively working to establish, or B, that action then puts people immediately against any of the suggestions we will bring up in that proper forum.
Well, I think a letter, frankly, that makes a request about landing fees at the same time that the roundtable is being created, gives it, all right, there's already agenda item number 1. on the first meeting of the roundtable is, oh, this letter that we got from Superior asking us to explore the possibility for landing fees. And why is that a good reason or a bad reason? And then you'll have everybody at the table voice in. It's not coming as any surprise. I think that's fine. But I mean, at least at that point, it's certainly on Jeffco's radar, because otherwise, what I'm concerned about with the roundtable is that we're not going to be involved in the agenda setting of the roundtable, and that the roundtable all of a sudden is going to start representing, the interests of the entire airport and, other jurisdictions, and not necessarily Superior's interests. And our Superior is acutely affected by the airport. And I think that there is much to be gained and very little to lose by being direct and making, the initial ask, sending something directly to the county commissioners. There's going to be 2 new county commissioners. So this is an opportunity for us to educate those 2 new county commissioners in Jeffco. So, I think we could score a lot of points in terms of impact by, sending a letter, right as the new commissioners are sworn in, and, getting it on their radar right away. And it'll coincide nicely with the creation of the roundtable.
And if we're going to do that, and we want to set the table and we want to set the tone, that's great. But I think if we only address the landing fees, that presupposes the solution. If we're going to send that letter, let's put out all the solutions our consultants have drawn up and have proposed to us, and say, listen, this is what we've been paying for consultants for the past 2 years. This is something we've been working on. This is a high priority. We have all these various solutions that have already been identified. These are what we are looking forward to working with you on in the roundtable setting and format. And we're hoping to work with you as a good neighbor.
So I am not supportive of a letter to discuss landing fees. I don't think we need to send a letter to let them know that we're bothered by airplane noise. I think they know that already. That's crystal clear. And this idea of landing fee, that is a business decision of that airport. And it is not our business as a neighboring entity to tell them what they need to be doing with their business entity. I mean, no more than we need to be telling Louisville, make a tax on this or that because we don't like your lawnmowers or something. I mean, if landing fees comes up in the roundtable and that's a solution, so be it. But I cannot be supportive of a letter about landing fees. I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves.
But there was just on what they don't know. I mean, there was some email traffic, and I think it was as late as the summer, where it was from a Jefferson County commissioner who had no idea that there was even all, which I found hard to believe. But what people don't know, and it's amazing, you could be 4 blocks away from my house in somebody else's house, and it's a different type of noise. And so it would not surprise me if somebody is 4 or 14 miles away in Jefferson County that does not pay attention to the noise complaints that are coming out of the town of Superior. So, I appreciate the comment that you're not supportive of making a recommendation to consider, but I do, which is fine. Thank you for the comment. But I do think that raising our hand to say, hey, did you know that we're getting a ton of complaints from members in the community, and this goes beyond just reading a report from the roundtable or reading a report from the noise. And this is, sorry, but people are moving, right? It is, and yeah, I don't think any of us expected to be home all day every day. Most of us used to go to offices, and so that's part of it. But we are losing people in the community that are moving. It is affecting people's mental health. It is affecting home prices. So it's not affecting home prices. I deal with home prices every day, and they're going up. So it's not affecting home prices. And
don't see a mass exodus of people leaving either. So I'm going to disagree.
I'm not suggesting there's a mass exodus, Clint, but yes, we all know people and could name 2 or 3 people that have moved out of town
and
as a result of the airplane noise.
And I don't disagree with that, but there's also people moving in town as well. So
I'd like to chime in on this one. I mean, I definitely see both sides with this, and I think where I'd encourage us to step back is what's our intent and our goal in sending this letter. Certainly, it would be wonderful if we sent a letter with landing fees and Jeffco said, "Great, we're implementing them tomorrow. We're all set." But that's not going to happen. And so I like Ken's point around the fact that we have this roundtable coming up. I think I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I think we need to make sure that the roundtable is productive. But I think Mark makes a great point that landing fees may not come up at the roundtable, and we want to get that on the agenda. So to me, the way to split the difference is, what if we send, Kevin, to your point, a friendly tone letter where we're not telling them what to do, but we're saying, we wanted to draw your attention to the complaints that we're getting, to the concerns that we have about people moving out and about noise. And then we've been working with consultants. We've spent a lot of money over the last 2 years on it. We've come up with a couple suggestions. We can even obliquely reference landing fees in there, but really just say, we want this to be agenda'd at the roundtable. We want this to be a topic of discussion, and we would love to work with you on solutions. To me, something like that achieves the purpose of, it's pointing out that we have a problem. It's letting them know that we're willing to do the hard work of coming up with some solutions, but we also want to partner with them on what those might be.
I think I kind of feel the same way as Laura. I mean, this one's tough, right? Because I've been a huge proponent of the roundtable, because I do think that is supposed to be, according to the FAA, the way to solve this. However, I've been incredibly disappointed at the pace of the formation of the roundtable. We've lost a year, not because of the consultants, but because all these neighboring communities just started dragging their feet on adopting the IGA. And the whole time we've been dragging our feet on adopting the IGA, the airport's running like nothing's changed. I mean, there's a brief slowdown in March and April, and then boom, it's right back to where it was, and it's going bonkers from there. So, and I think, Mark brings up a really good point, because even after the roundtable is formed, there's going to be a whole lot of analysis and discussion and, double checking that this is really truly a problem and looking at the data. And why not just kind of bring it to the surface? Like, hey, here are some possible solutions. And I don't know that our consultants have actually suggested solutions that included landing fees. I think it was on the litany of things that could be done. The VZ angle and these things could be looked at. And if it's in that list, yeah, I'm fully in support of just reminding the commissioners that Louisville and Jefferson, Lewis and Superior have spent $80,000 in the last couple of years for the consultants to put this stuff together. Through their work, we've formed the roundtable, and through the work of the consultants, there's a number of things that we would like RMMA to start looking at, and through the roundtable to go and address them. So I think from that perspective, I'm not opposed to the letter, because it will try to get this thing going a little faster. Because in the 19 months that we've had the consultants on board, we've probably got 4 months of work out of them, because of all the slowdowns and stops and starts. It's not them. I actually pin a lot of this on the IGA to try to get the roundtable. Those documents have been done since February. So, this is on everybody else that's just been dragging their feet towards it. And there's no guarantee that even after the roundtable magically appears, that we won't see the same foot dragging on bringing it forward.
I don't know that there's been intentional foot dragging on part of communities. I mean, that we had a pandemic that's been going on, and that's taken a considerable amount of time and effort from all the different communities. So I think it's, yes, it's delayed, but yes, it's going to happen. But I think that's the biggest part of why it's not happened sooner.
I will chime in with my opinion that I don't think so much it's that it's delayed. I still see that we haven't gotten any solutions from the consultants, which I have been saying for 2 years straight. We need a list of actual strategies, which we have not gotten.
Yeah, agreed, Laura. So, I mean, what success would be in my book is I would like to see somebody from RMMA, like Paul Anslow, articulate the case for, why he would adopt landing fees or why he would not. And then ultimately the county commissioners or the airport authority, whoever is actually directing RMMA in terms of the decisions that they're making, just fully consider the issue, because I don't think that they, at least to my knowledge, it hasn't been considered, at least not in any public way that we would be privy to. And I think that it's just something that is a possible solution, and I would like to see it considered rather than never even acknowledged or brought to anybody's attention who, other than, maybe Paul Anslow, but like somebody else at the county, on the county commissioners, so they at least know about this as a potential solution. I don't think we're doing enough if we don't do that. And I have I share everybody's concerns about the pace of the roundtable, and I think the roundtable will be a good place to discuss things. But if we want to get things done, I think we need a different strategy. And that does not necessarily include just waiting on our consultants to give us a recommendation on any strategy, because they've had 2 years to do that.
And I'll be honest, I mean, I think the issue with our consultants is they've got two bosses between Louisville and Superior. And I don't know that the two communities are fully aligned on what we wanted out of the consultants. I think to date, most of their work has been focused on the IGA for the roundtable, because that's kind of how they've been directed to get the IGA, get the roundtable up and running as the forum and the platform to advocate for change. And I think that's more a function, not of what our ABC times 2 specifically wanted to do. It's just what they've seen historically work because of the rules and regs around the FAA. So, I mean, I don't want to defend ABC times 2. I think they're struggling with, two heads guiding them with, our communities between Louisville and Superior. We're very different in our needs. And I think they've tried to, thread the needle there by using the roundtable as a platform to get it sorted out. And I think it is foot dragging, because I think Superior for the last 6 months, we have operated with, very little hesitation in our step because of COVID. We've got a lot done. And I think some of the other communities are definitely facing some other issues, but there's really no excuse that this thing couldn't have been signed, sealed, and delivered 4 months ago with the roundtable. So circling back, I mean, if there's, I think as Laura said, sort of an oblique reference to landing fees, I'm not opposed to that. I do believe that the roundtable can help solve the community issues, but I think the reality is it's not going to happen in 2021. It probably won't happen anywhere near as soon as we want it to. So why not push a little harder?
Okay.
I'm not sure where we all left off. So it sounds like there's at least broad enough broad enough support is a broad letter that is more educational in nature, that puts out solutions that have been discussed. Landing fees will be one of the listed solutions, and this document can be used as a starting place, not only just for our discussions with our MMA, but for when the roundtable actually kicks off.
So, Ken, I almost think that I heard, it needs to be from all of us, right? And don't forget, there's going to be at least 2 new board members in a few weeks. But I think something that says,
Kevin's really confident.
No, there will be at least, you're right, there will be at least 1 more board member. Sorry. I trouble with math today.
Good. I thought I was losing my mind trying to find out who was leaving. So some recall petition I didn't know about.
He's already written me off, and he's given up.
I'm sorry. This was supposed to end at 9. As you see from the background, I'm getting in trouble. I need to file some things. I think at a minimum, there's a letter that says to the new commissioners, welcome. We've been engaged with Director Anslow for a couple of years now, have learned the following. We've met with, a couple of us have met with the flight school, the data. We did a survey, it revealed the following. We met with the flight schools, we learned the following, and we look forward to the partnership. And Clint, I suspect the paragraph 4, which will say, we'd like to talk about possible noise mitigation strategies. And we think that a potential landing fee may provide the economic disincentive to reduce touch and goes is not something you'll support. But I think paragraphs 1 through 3 and a nice closing paragraph is something that you would support, which is, welcome, and we're your neighbors and we've learned a lot and we want to continue the dialogue. Which is paragraph 4, you won't support, I think.
So are you talking about a letter to new Boulder County commissioners, new Jefferson County commissioners?
Jeffco.
Jeffco.
And
I think Mark's suggestion around Jeffco, and I agree. I think it's good, and I think it's, what I started with, it's the tone, and I think your coaching is good, Clint. We can't come in and say, here's how we want you to, welcome to your job. Now let us tell you how to do it.
Here's what I would be supportive of is a dialogue with them. Maybe 1 or 2 board members get on a Zoom call with new commissioners and have this as a dialogue and not as a letter. Something about firing off letters, to me, it sets a whole different tone. I think the idea of having a dialogue with new county commissioners, great idea. Let them know with a video face conversation, here's the struggles we're having, probably heard about them. And by the way, here's a new topic that's come up. I still think that's getting ahead of ourselves, but I would feel less bad about it in the format of a Zoom dialogue than I would a letter. I just can't support a letter. I just think we're gonna really stir up a hornet's nest more so than we already have, than we need to.
Well, I don't think we've stirred up the hornet's nest, but I mean, this is why I respectfully disagree, and why I think a letter is critically important, valuable, and I think we have a unique opportunity to do it right now. We have an election where we're going to have a new board. They're going to have a new board, and we're forming an airport roundtable, which currently doesn't exist. So in terms of introducing ourselves to the board, number one, we're serving that purpose. We're opening that dialogue, formally. We're expressing that we're really looking forward to working together with them and surrounding communities and the airport itself through the airport roundtable. And as we start that process and we're going to start these meetings, here's some things that are on our mind that we've learned over the past 2 years that we've looked seriously at, the conditions that have been affecting our community, through the work of our consultants and elsewhere. And really it's an opportunity to just kind of introduce a topic that may, to Kevin's point, if you're 14 miles away from RMMA, you don't even know that it exists. You're bothered more by, the noise from I-70 than airport noise, whatever it is, right? So everybody's got their own issues that are important to them. And this is probably not on any of their radars. So it's an opportunity for us to just educate them about the issue and, lay the groundwork for some possible solutions that can be further discussed at the roundtable and really move the ball forward without, in a threatening way saying, it's my way or the highway, you got to do this. We're just starting the dialogue, but we're starting it in a way that is not as easy to ignore or forget about through an informal conversation.
I think that makes a great point around kind of, there is turnover on the boards. Now is a great time to send this letter and almost use that as the excuse for why we're sending it, to catch you up on this important issue. I also think, I don't think a conversation makes sense. When we have the airport roundtable, that's what the purpose of that is, for dialogue. It feels like it would be weird to have a pre-dialogue to that where we're saying, well, here's some ideas. We don't really want to discuss them now because that's what the roundtable is for, but we wanted to throw them your way. To me, that makes much more sense in an email or a letter or something like that.
Okay, I appreciate the conversation. I'm still not convinced, but if y'all want to write a letter and sign it, write it. So let's.
I guess I would just add as the counterpoint to that, I like the letter approach. I do not want my name signed for me until I see the letter because the tone is very important.
Yeah, no, yes, 100%. Nobody's, I actually think, yes.
I think we all agree on that. So.
Right, yeah, we all have the ability to do whatever we want to do in our day jobs or our private lives, of course. But I think if we could find a way to speak with one voice, and I think, Clint, I think it's a challenge, and we hear you, but I may take a stab at it anyway. So.
Okay.
I'm happy to do some drafting as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Last item on the agenda is discussion of possible committee realignment for PROSAC and OSAC.
Yeah, so the discussion, I don't know if it was earlier this year or late last year, but about possibly merger between the Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Committee and Open Space Advisory Committee. And those were put on hold, those discussions of merger. And, the committees over the years have had numerous areas where they overlap in interest, which creates confusion amongst the committees and the members, and the responsibilities for certain items such as trails, trail development, open space, acquisition, and many prioritizations, budget recommendations to the board. So there's been some discussion about, ways that maybe the committees can improve their areas of interest and what they focus on, which I think might be helpful. There's an attached visual that was included in the packet that kind of put certain focus of areas for the committees, each committee, and things that they might focus on. So which would, if the board was supportive and the committees have a chance to discuss and they're supportive, would require us to bring back their establishing resolutions and kind of just modify and clarify what they see. A perfect example of this was the trail that goes through Autry Park. The two committees met separately on the alignment and had separate recommendations for that trail alignment. So that, that leaves staff, what do we do with this? Where are we going to put the trail alignment and things like that? And then we had the instance where the PROSTAC master plan, the consultant presented to OSAC before it presented to PROSTAC, and that was simply because of OSAC's meeting is earlier in the month than PROSTAC's, and so things like that. So if we are able to, even if we decide not to merge, which seems like is the case, if we can clarify their responsibilities and roles of the committee, I think it'll be helpful to everyone, including the board. So just put this on the agenda for get thoughts from the board and see what you thought about the committees discussing this and possibly bringing back their establishing resolutions at some point after the first year, probably for some clarification and revisions.
I'll go first. I think it was the last retreat, Matt. It wasn't that long ago, but it does feel like a million years ago. That's when we had kind of suggested that we look at merging the two committees, and then they met separately, and quite honestly, they really weren't on board with it. And as I kind of thought about it, I actually agree that it's not the best solution, because ultimately the town would be depriving itself of 9 able-bodied volunteers. We'd smush 2 groups into one, and through natural attrition, we'd probably get reduced down to 9 in that one committee, as opposed to keeping them both separately. We get 18. As one committee member noted to me, we get 9 bodies of free labor doing a tremendous amount of work for the town. So I think finding a way for them to coexist and sort of isolating the one or two areas that they've overlapped, I think is going to sort out a lot of things. And I think both committees that are a natural tipping point between the purchase of 1500 Colton and the purchase of CenturyLink, where one is going to realize indoor space that ProStack has never really had an ability to opine on for programming, and then OSAC has kind of picked up the through the acquisition of CenturyLink, we've got the sort of the shining beacon, so to speak, of open space purchases for the community. So I think they can pivot and sort of reorient how they want to focus going forward. With this sort of resegmentation, so to speak, I would argue that the names maybe need to be changed, because it doesn't make sense to have the O and the S in ProStack any longer. But that's something that the committees can sort of decide on. And I think with this, if the committees are on board with it, there might need to be some people that want to switch from one side to the other. And I think that should be something we consider seriously about how to make happen, since we just staffed up both committees with they're both at full 9 as of I think our last board meeting. And if we want to try to find a way to accommodate some moving back and forth, if there's something in the new orientation that's more attractive than it was, then I think we should find a way to do that. But I'm actually really excited that this is bubbled up in this way, because I think this is going to sort out a lot of the angst that town and even the board has had to deal with in the past, and kind of define clear R&R.
So obviously this is something we've been struggling with for the past however many years. So I think we've been talking about it ever since I joined OSAC 9 years ago. And I think this takes a really good stab at it. I think the graphic shows a decent solution. Just thinking through where the most time is spent between the committees, or at least in my experience, and then also trying to observe their agendas, is the 5-year trails plan that gets updated every year, because that takes 2 or 3, sometimes 4 months of coordination. If we don't figure out a solution as to where that goes, we're only going to be scratching the surface. One solution is that we make that maybe a triennial project and do that once every 3 years, because frankly, how many trails are we building these days? So I know one of my frustrations when I was on the committee was we do this every year. We wouldn't build anything, but we'd still spend months and months talking about it. So it was a fruitless effort at times. But the other piece, and it looked like that was addressed actually in the graphic, is that there was also coordination necessary on recommendations to Boulder County for open space and trails, and it looks like that would go under OSAC. So I think that does a good job. So I think if those two pieces can be figured out, I think that's probably 90% of the overlap, and that solves a lot of the problem. I don't necessarily see a problem with OSAC being presented to first. I mean, from the consultants for the master plan, I mean, they went and met with everybody, ACES, CAPS. I mean, it was timing is timing. And frankly, I also don't necessarily see a problem if we get two recommendations that don't necessarily align, because it gives either us or staff something to think through. Why are we getting 2 different recommendations? But if we can figure out somewhere where trails fits in more uniformly, I think that solves 90% of the problem. And yes, if we can get everybody on board from each committee and figure out a path forward on that, I will support that 100% and realign them. Good to go.
I will just say that I continue to believe they should be merged, but I think until such time that we have agreement between the two, I don't think we need to be doing it. But if some realignment, like Neil was describing, could be achieved, I could support that as well.
I really like the realignment that Neil proposed. I think there will always be some areas there will always be some areas of confusion between the two, but I think they do tend to attract two very different groups of volunteers as well. You have some volunteers who are really passionate about open space and trails and for lack of a better term, kind of like the unmanicured wild land in the neighborhood. And then you have other people who are more passionate about pickleball and Frisbee tournaments and, things that are occurring in our manicured spaces and events along those lines. So I think the two do have different purposes. I originally was supportive of merging them, but now that I see this proposal, I think it makes a lot of sense to keep them separate, as long as the leads of each committee are committed to keeping in close touch with each other. And I think that can be done. As long as, Matt, you don't think this is too much administrative burden, I think that Leslie can play a strong role in making sure that there are clear communications between the committees. She could also be the ultimate arbiter of should, project A be something for the OSAC committee or for the PERTAC committee or whatever we end up calling that one.
Yeah, I think from a staff perspective, we'll be able to manage the two committees. If we're able to get some clarification on trails for sure, and any other areas that the committees feel are important, I think that'll help. Yeah.
I think it's an elegant split, Neil, that you came up with. I appreciate the conversation. I think it's good for us to deal with and address the overlap that has been an ongoing problem. I was just talking the other day about this issue, and the fact that we have a full roster for both ProStack and OSAC right now, and we had, I think, more people who wanted to actually be on them than we had available spots. So, that's a great position to be in. And, I certainly am not in favor of eliminating a committee if it means we're, casting aside 9, passionate volunteers. I think it's a different conversation if we're having, committees of 4 and 5 members operating independently. But right now we seem to have active and engaged residents who are volunteering their time, and I think that we should let them do that and benefit from the amount of time that they're going to spend working on our community. But I think generally speaking, the idea of bringing back their authorizing resolutions to clarify what their missions are, I think is a good idea. And in a perfect world, we're not telling OSAC and ProStack that this is the way it's going to be. We are doing this collaboratively with them at the table, at the meeting, talking about why they're in favor of this idea because it's better for them and better for the community. So, in a perfect world, that's kind of how I would see it happening.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we may have reached the end. Anyone have anything else on this or any other items on our agenda? Okay, well, good work session, everyone. And if there's nothing else, we will adjourn for the night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.